All right, let's get it. Drive time, Wednesday afternoon. 19 minutes, or 16 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. Little late today. Did a little crosstalk with our guy James and also the Brown Bear, Brian Brown. But hello, how are you? Happy Wednesday, halfway through that work week. You are one day closer to the weekend. It is great to have you with us on this hot June Wednesday afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Sunny outside, beautiful day. Good to have you along for the ride. Happy draft day. Excited for tonight. We're going to have great draft coverage for you guys. I'll be anchoring our coverage. James will be producing. We're going to have Porter at the Zions Bank Basketball Center and Gordy Chiesa, Richard Smith, who combined have about 90 years of experience in the world of talent evaluation and draft nights and professional basketball on the coaching and administration side. We'll be live in studio. Excited to catch up with them and excited to bring the best coverage of the draft in the market to you. Lot to do. A lot of rumors surrounding what we could see tonight. One rumor surrounding the Utah Jazz making inquiries about a superstar player who plays for the Boston Celtics, namely Jaylen Brown. Boston has already shed a bunch of salaries. They've already made a bunch of movement. Drew Holiday is a Blazer. Kristaps Porzingis is a member of the Atlanta Hawks. We'll talk about all the deals that have happened and get to the potential movements or lack thereof for the Utah Jazz, who as of now have number 5 and number 21 in the first round and a couple of second-rounders to boot. It is a big day for the Jazz. It is a big night for the Jazz. It's a big night for this organization. You get a top 5 pick. You just don't want to get it wrong. A lot of people do. That's part of the deal. We'll go over the latest mock drafts from all the draft experts and tell you what they're saying about the potential for the Jazz to draft at 5. So a lot to do, busy show. That's not the only thing going on. Of course, we talked about the college football landscape a lot yesterday. We'll get to know Ryder Lyons a little bit more, do some Utah football, do some BYU offseason football as well. 66 days away from kick in the world of college football. So busy show on this Wednesday afternoon. We are going to start with Tim Bontemps from ESPN. I would imagine Tim will be live at the draft. That's my best guess. And he'll give us kind of a scene setter and let us know what he's hearing. We'll talk about all the deals that have gone down. Are the Jazz really in on the Jaylen Brown sweepstakes? Would the Celtics really move on from Jaylen Brown? We'll get into it with Tim Bontemps. Rafael Barlow from the NBA Big Board once upon a time, started by our good friend Chad Ford. Shout out Chad Ford. Early mentor of mine in the draft process. Chad was doing it at a high level for a long time. I believe Chad lives here now. He spent some time on the North Shore because he's a very smart man. But Rafael took over from Chad, doing a great job front of the program. He'll stop by today. Move over to the voice of the Jazz, Craig Bolerjack. A good day to have Bowler on the program. We'll get a scene setter from Craig, what he's hearing on the Jazz side of things. Spencer Linton, our buddy from BYU TV, will do some college football, some college basketball with Spencer today. Move into the 5 o'clock hour of the program, and then we will say goodnight at 6 and then make way for our draft coverage. Myself, Richard Smith, Gordy Chiesa, on a busy Wednesday show, and it's good to have you with us. Tim Bontemps, Rafael Barlow, Craig Bolerjack, Spencer Linton, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, who is wearing a collared shirt. You made me nervous for you when I saw. I didn't know you were going to the ZBBC. I was like, what are you doing wearing a collared shirt?
You asked, and I quote, "Did you just come back from court?"
Well,
is that the assumption now?
Well, here's the deal. So when it comes, if you ever see me in a suit and a tie, just know one of two things has happened. I had to be at court or I had to go to the bank.
Okay.
Or meet with a lawyer. Okay, those are the 3 things that I'll wear a tie for. I've funerals, weddings,
maybe a wedding,
maybe a church. Who knows? It's been a minute there, but anyway.
That's fair. I mean, I did have to point out that I am still wearing slippers. So no court today. No appearances, no depositions, none of the like.
Okay.
Just doing some draft stuff. And once I run out of clean shirts with no collars, that's when I wear my collared shirts.
Okay. No, fair enough. Okay, let me ask you before we dig into it. I don't think I've asked you this. I've asked all of our NBA guests. You watch a lot of college basketball. You study the draft. Best case, realistic scenario if the Jazz stay at 5 for you is who and why?
Ooh. I like Trey Johnson more. I really do. I know you waver back and forth. The number 5 pick, Spence, is an interesting one in a draft where I think obviously there's a clear number 1, but I also think there's kind of a clear number 3, 2 as well. I think Trey Johnson, if you stay and just pick the number 5 pick, That's kind of the guy that I have zeroed in on. But I also do think there's some options where he and a few other players are available at 5, and the Jazz are able to work some other things out. We shall see in a matter of about 4 hours from right now.
Yes, indeed. It's a late night for us. We're going to be on air live for about 6 hours. I'll be ready for a nap after we're done. But our first guest today will be Tim Bontemps from ESPN. But before we get to Timmy Goodtime Bontemps, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks on a Wednesday afternoon, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
All right, let's be very clear. It is a massive day for the Utah Jazz organization. It is a massive night for the Utah Jazz organization. You cannot get this one wrong. It is a top 5 pick, and of course, that's just where they're at right now, and there's a chance they could move, and we'll dig in all the scenarios. The mock drafts that have been released today, this is the up-to-date mock drafts from the people that do this for a living. So our friend Rafael Barlow, who's going to join us coming up in just about 35 minutes from right now, has the Utah Jazz taking Trey Johnson out of Texas at number 5. NBC's draft has Jeremiah Fears going to the Jazz at 5. The Ringer has Con Knippel out of Duke going to the Jazz at 5. No Ceilings has Ace Bailey going to the Jazz at 5. And then both ESPN, Jonathan Givony, and The Athletic, Sam Vecini, those are the two that I read the most, have the Jazz taking Jeremiah Fears, the point guard out of Oklahoma. So those are the names the experts have linked to the Utah Jazz as of now. A far more interesting scenario that has been, well, the talks have been reported. Nothing has been reported as far as something that's imminent, something that's on the horizon. So we're going to discuss 2 different scenarios here as far as the potential of the Jazz actually making a move instead of drafting at 5 or 21 or the couple of second rounders they also have in their back pocket. So obviously there are synergistic relationships between the Utah Jazz front office and the Boston Celtics front office. Danny Ainge hired Brad Stevens to coach the Celtics, and Danny Ainge was involved in the scenario, handpicking Brad to be his replacement when he decided to first step back from his full-time responsibilities and then ultimately retire from the Boston Celtics. Obviously, the retirement lasted a year because he landed here, moved to Provo so he could be with his family more, and then Ryan Smith hired him to be the CEO of Jazz Basketball. And obviously, Austin Ainge, Danny's son, stuck around Boston and worked for Brad in a high-level capacity for a number of years, and now Austin is here. I'll add to the layer that Will Hardy, the Utah Jazz head coach, was the #1 assistant coach for Ime Udoka for a couple of years in Boston, and therefore is familiar with the front office, familiar with Danny, familiar with Austin, and also familiar with Brad Stevens, who he worked for, and the players that currently play for the Boston Celtics that were there when Will was an assistant coach, namely Jaylen Brown. All right. So there's a scenario in play here, and I'm not sure if this will even come close to happening. And if Boston had not already made the moves they had made, maybe this would be more likely. And there is a world where this continues to remain likely. So Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics over the course of the past 48 hours have saved their ownership group over $2 million as a result of 2 transactions. The Celtics received George Niang and a second-round pick. The Hawks received Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick. The Nets get Terrence Mann and a first-round pick. The Nets have 6 first-round picks in the draft tonight as they continue their rebuild. Okay, so that's one deal they made. The other deal they made is the Portland Trail Blazers, who actually played well down the stretch last year, are very much trying to establish this defensive culture, right? Under head coach Chauncey Billups, they've got a bunch of really good young defenders on that roster. So they grabbed Drew Holiday, who was actually in Portland once upon a time. They send Anthony Simons, a talented yet mercurial, kind of confusing young player who can really fill it up, and there's a lot to like about him, but he's not very efficient, doesn't make great decisions, but he's a good athlete, he can really score. Boston gets a couple of second-rounders there as well. And so as a result of those 2 transactions, the Boston Celtics have saved over $200 million in luxury tax economic punitive penalties, okay? So they've already really they've already really accomplished what they set out to accomplish to start this offseason. But it does bring into question whether or not they want to go all in on a reset while Jason Tatum sits next year with a torn Achilles tendon, potentially grab some draft capital, and maybe move on from a player who they've already paid $300 million for, and that player is Jaylen Brown. So Jaylen Brown is really good. There's your analysis. No, I can remember when the Jazz were discussing the Mitchell options. One of the things I talked about is maybe you call Boston, ask about Jaylen Brown, and therefore you don't lose your young 25-year-old superstar for nothing. Or just, pennies on the dollar. I'm not saying they got pennies on the dollar for Donovan, but there's a world that exists where I don't know that they got enough for him. Ultimately, the example I continue to use is both OKC and Indiana parlaying Paul George into generational cornerstones for both those franchises that just made the NBA Finals. One got Tyrese Halliburton in a roundabout way as a result of what they received for Paul George. The other got SGA and a bunch of picks that one of them included Jalen Williams. So did the Jazz get enough for Donovan? Of course, we're not going to do much on that today, but Jalen was one of the names that I looked at. Like, man, maybe they could grab him. He's 28 years old. He's 6'7". He's 225. Danny drafted him. He can guard multiple positions. He's a high-level scorer. There's some stuff in the postseason that's always been a little bit odd for his career. He's 19 points. He's 5 boards. He's 3 assists. Last year, he was 22 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 33% from 3, 47% from the floor. And at the age of 28, he's still very much in his prime, okay? So there have been multiple outlets over the course of the last 24 hours that have indicated the Jazz and the Celtics have discussed the framework of a Jaylen Brown deal. Here's the problem. If you're the Jazz, and if you're going to do this, you have to hold on to Markkanen, and you have to hold on to Kessler. And I think you have to hold on to 5 tonight, quite frankly. And if you're Boston, if you're going to trade Jaylen Brown, you're asking for a king's ransom. But if you don't hold on to Markkanen, if you don't hold on to Kessler, if you don't hold on to 5, there's no point in trading for Jaylen Brown. Because if you just exchange Markkanen for Jaylen, like, oh, Jaylen's a better player, I will die on that hill, much better player. But what are you, like a 36, 37 win team? And therefore, next year, there's no forward traction. The other thing is if you trade for Jaylen Brown, and if you hold on to Markkanen, if you hold on to Kessler, if you hold on to 5, you might as well just call Oklahoma City and say, hey, good luck drafting, with our pick next year that we're going to lose because we're going to be outside of the top 8. And therefore, it just goes to OKC. How much motivation is there from Austin Ainge? I don't know. If I had to guess, I don't think the Jazz do this deal. If I had to guess, I think Boston's probably asking for too much. And I think the Jazz probably make the pick tonight at 5, probably make the pick at 21, maybe even 2 second-rounders, and continue to try to shed salary with some of their veteran pieces. But in the name of a long game, I don't think they're taking a massive step forward anytime soon, but only time will tell. We will catch our first break of a busy Wednesday, probably 6-hour radio shift. And we'll bring in Timmy Goodtime Bontemps to bat leadoff coming up on the other side of a Wednesday drive right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got a busy show, a lot to do. Don't forget, we'll say goodnight for this show at 6 o'clock Mountain Time and then make way for our live NBA draft coverage, which I will be anchoring. And live in studio, we will have Gordy, Chiesa, and Richard Smith. Combined, that's like 90 years of NBA talent evaluation experience. So pump for that. And pump for this. I would imagine we're going live to Brooklyn, where we find Tim Bontemps from ESPN. Is that a fair assumption, Timmy? You on the ground?
I can't keep up with Gordon Chiesa, but yeah, I'm sitting on the floor at Barclays Center right now, where the actual start in a few hours, and we'll see how everything shakes out.
Okay, very nice. Well, I appreciate you making time for a little old Salt Lake City radio station on draft day, Tim. It's very nice of you, and I'll start with whether or not you have any intel on all of these rumors. And it makes sense, right? There's a lot of synergies between the Boston front office and the Jazz front office for obvious reasons. And Boston appears to be motivated to shed some salary. I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown, but a lot of people reporting that there are conversations between the two for a framework of a deal that would land Jaylen Brown in Salt Lake. Are you hearing anything along these lines, Tim?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on today. I think we'll see what happens over the next few hours. But, I mean, on the podcast, we say actions over words, and if you look at the actions of the last 2 days, the Celtics have saved about $250 million in 2 trades. So given the Jason Tatum injury, given where this team is at, you would certainly expect them to probably be looking in a more of a gap year situation this year. And so therefore, if they can make some moves to have a longer-term lens on their franchise, then maybe they'll do it. However, I would say that if they're going to move on from Jaylen Brown or Derek White, I would expect the price to be pretty high in both cases, if not really high. So I would be surprised if a deal gets done with Utah or anyone else. But I learned in February that I will never say that I won't be surprised again after the Luka Doncic trade. And so I will invoke that in this situation and say that while, usually there's a lot of talk about trades like this and they don't happen in general, I learned in February to never assume anything is impossible. And so we'll wait and see what happens.
For sure. And look, excuse me, Jaylen is awesome. I've always loved him. He was a Pac-12 kid, so we saw some college ball of his out this way. Best year, probably 2022, 27 points, 7 boards, 4 assists. He's a career 35% shooter from 3, which is fine, not great, but there's so many things he can do that are so dynamic. But, Tim, the only way this makes sense for the Jazz is if they're able to hold on to Markkanen and Kessler and probably even 5. Like, the framework of a deal would be all of these expiring veteran contracts to match the salaries, Collins, Sexton, whatever, and then probably a bevy of picks. But if they're asking for Markkanen and Kessler and 5, well, I don't really see the point in bringing in Jaylen. So I figure from a Jazz standpoint, it only makes sense if you can hold on to your other good players, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I would be particularly surprised if a deal happens with Utah for the reasons you just said. I don't really see why it makes sense for Utah, and I don't really see why it makes sense for Boston. The price point doesn't really match up on either side. I mean, the Jazz have this top 8 protected pick this year. I don't expect them to be very good. I would think you maybe ramp it up in a year after that, expires. And I like you said, the price point, it's difficult to see how it gets to a place where it makes sense for both sides to do a deal. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But intellectually, it's hard to see where a trade ultimately would make sense for both sides, or you walk away from it saying, yeah, I get why both teams are doing it, both for now and in the future. So, like I said before, we'll see what happens. I'm not ruling anything out anymore in the NBA, but this time of year, a lot of things are said. Not a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things happen, but a lot more things are said than do happen ultimately. And I suspect that will probably be the case on this front.
The other rumor that's been out there, and, in today's day and age, I get aggregated every day. I know somebody like you, it's that times 10. So I always have a hard time understanding who exactly is reputable, who out there is aggregating, what is actually real. And I don't know if San Antonio would move off of 2. It feels like, with what Oklahoma City has shown you, the term redundancy might need to be thrown out the window. Just get a bunch of dudes between 6'4" and 6'8" that are awesome. And whether that's Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, and you throw in a De'Aaron Fox, maybe there's not the redundancy maybe we figured there would be once upon a time. But, if San Antonio is willing to move off of 2 and the Jazz have done their calculation like everybody else that they think Dylan can be a franchise piece, something like a Markkanen and 5 in exchange for like a Harrison Barnes, a Keldon Johnson, and 2 seems to make more sense because then you can actually back up the Austin Ainge assertion that we are not going to manipulate minutes to tank and just play young kids and not be very good. And maybe Dylan's kind of the cornerstone you've been after the entire time. Any thoughts on that potential scenario?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fun trade machine trade. I would put it in the same bucket as what we just talked about. And I would also say, like we talked about the last time I was on, the idea that you're not going to, quote unquote, tank, or you're not going to, quote unquote, manipulate minutes, there's still a lot of ways to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not, quote unquote, manipulating minutes or, quote unquote, tanking, right? Like, we just saw the Portland Trailblazers trade for Drew Holiday. I don't particularly understand why they did so, but, like, they're trying to win games. The Phoenix Suns are also not very good. They're going to be active this week, trying to trade for a bunch of players to get better now. They're going to be trying to win games. The New Orleans Pelicans just traded for Jordan Poole. That's a move that they made to try to win games, right? Those might be the 12th, 13th, and 14th best teams in the West this year. So if you're the Jazz, like, I'm like, look, if the Jazz can get Dylan Harper, I would say get Dylan Harper. I suspect they can't get Dylan Harper. But I would also just say in general, I don't really see a lot of worlds where the Jazz are good next year, no matter what they say they're going to try to do or not do. And I think that's part of why, to me, you're at least a year away from really trying to go in the other direction in terms of trying to push forward, simply because the West is an absolute bear on a nightly basis, and the Jazz just have an awful lot of work to do to even get to where some of these other teams are.
And I tend to agree with you. And, you've been coming on the show for almost 6 years, Tim. So by now you should know that I really am a good time NBA trade machine type of talk show host. You understand that, right?
Hey, listen. That is the whole point. I wasn't saying that to be facetious. That's the whole point of today, right? Like, this is a fun – if you're an NBA fan, like, today's a fun day, right? I mean, for me, it feels like Game 8 of the NBA Finals because it's been a long month. But yeah, look, this is a fun day, and on a day like this, when there's a lot of stuff in the air and there's a lot of teams that are actively trying to make moves, and frankly, there's a lot of teams that aren't going to be able to do a lot of stuff past today because there's not a lot of cap space this summer. There's not a lot of interesting free agents this summer. Like, this could easily be the most consequential day of the summer. And so because of that, like, there's a lot of stuff floating around. There's a lot of things that are in play. The Nets have 5 first-round picks, right? They got 15 or 17% of the draft by themselves today. What are they going to do? There's a lot of intrigue in the top 10. Nobody's really certain what Utah is going to do. It's going to be, I think, a really interesting and fun night. And it is a night where if you're a fan of the Jazz, like, you should be sitting there thinking, hey, like, maybe this could happen or maybe that could happen. Like, that's sort of the whole point of it. And it'll be very interesting on Austin's first time running a draft room, even though he's been in a draft room many times, to see what he decides to do and where the Jazz decide to go.
Let me ask you about that dynamic. I do want to get to some other things from a macro perspective. I've already buried the lead. We actually do have a team that was just historic and won the championship, and Kevin Durant's a Rocket, and we'll get to some of those things in just a moment. But, it really is, and I've had a bunch of guests talk about this, including the 2 gentlemen that will be by my side tonight with Smitty and Gordy. I don't know that I'll use the term unprecedented, but it's pretty rare that just a couple of weeks before potentially one of the biggest decisions this organization has had to make in a long time, in a very paramount offseason, you bring in an entirely new decision maker and tell a staff that has been reporting to other people, like, all of your work is now kind of at the fingertips of your new boss, who is this gentleman here, as Austin walks into the room. What sort of dynamic do you think that brings in? Ryan was very clear. Ryan Smith was very clear. This is his show now, and there's a staff of scouts and talent evaluators that have been working hard for years, reporting to other people that now have a new boss. What sort of dynamic do you think that makes?
I mean, look, obviously it'll be different, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I mean, I've gotten to know Austin over the years. He's a really good guy. think he and Dustin Zanuck, and obviously, his father is there. Will Hardy is a great guy. Like that's a very good group of people. They all have experience with each other and around each other. I think that the synergy of that will all be fine. And look, like Austin has been studying this stuff for years too, right? It's not like he's coming from the New England Patriots. So I think, like, obviously it's different if you have a new boss, but I think in general, like, I think the general themes are probably going to be fairly similar to before. Now, look, if they go trade for Jaylen Brown, like, yeah, then obviously that's a way different path than the one the Jazz have been on the last couple of years. But I think that the synergy of all those guys together will be fine. And like we talked about the last time I was on, I think the Jazz are in a really good position across the board organizationally. Now the question is, how do you get the talent level to match the rest of it? And that, in a small market, in this new era of the NBA, where it's very difficult to have success in the draft in terms of jumping up to get a Cooper Flag or to get a Dylan Harper, right? You need a lot of luck to do that. We saw the 4 worst record teams all slide down, 4 or 5 worst in this year's lottery. So, like, it's going to be a challenge, but I think the Jazz are well positioned to be able to turn things around with the people they have. And I think Austin is a guy, like I said, he's a guy I've known a long time. I think he deserves an opportunity like this. And I think the synergy there with all those guys together should be pretty good. And it should lead to what I hope is a good situation for the Jazz for quite a while to come.
All right, so over to the draft, and then we'll end with the OKC stuff and your thoughts on Durant and who in the West can actually make Oklahoma City uncomfortable, if anybody, for the next couple of years as they'll continue to stay together. I want the Tim Bontemps take on the Ace Bailey story, who I was actually looking this up yesterday because I had a TV hit last night to preview the draft tonight. 6 months ago, Gavoni, Bassini from The Athletic, a lot of the draft experts had Flag at 1, and then it was Harper or Bailey at 2. Now, that tide shifted about 3 months ago when it clearly became Dillon at 2. But up until a few weeks ago, it was staunchly Ace at 3. So we know the deal. Now, I want to be careful. Ace is 18. His agent is someone named Omar Cooper, who I've read is somewhat new at this. This is not a reflection of Ace's decision-making, but he continues to tap out of workouts, and we could debate whether or not these individual workouts mean anything. But typically, Tim, in the past, if you're going to cancel all these workouts, you have a promise, and maybe you do. But he canceled Philly at 3, and he doesn't have a promise at 1 or 2. I wouldn't imagine he does. Maybe tonight will shock us all. But what do you make of how this Ace Bailey story is unfolded, and what do you think it means for him tonight?
I mean, I think we'll see what happens over the next few hours, but I suspect that they have a destination in mind. And, I think if they get where they want to go and they feel good about it, then, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen this kind of thing happen. Famously, Kobe Bryant got John Calipari to not take him with the New Jersey Nets 20, 30 years ago, and he ended up with the Lakers. We've seen a lot of instances in the past where, like Jalen Williams, I think, shut down. You mentioned the Thunder winning the title. I'm pretty sure Jalen Williams of the Thunder shut down his workouts right after the combine and ended up going to the Thunder at 12. Like, this isn't really a new phenomenon. Obviously, there's a lot of intrigue about it because of where Ace is sitting in the draft, but I don't think Ace is falling out of the top 10. I don't think it's falling out of the top 6 or 7, personally. Look, this is one of those things where if he ends up, like I said, if he ends up in the destination he hopes to be in, and like I said, it does seem like he has one, and he ends up having a great career, then we'll look back on it and say, hey, good job by him getting to the place he wanted to go, and it all worked out great, right? So, I think that's just sort of how, at times in the draft, like, look, if you think about it this way, if you're a player, right, you're going into the NBA draft, you're likely going to be with your teams if you're good, for the next decade, right? So if you have a chance, in my opinion, if you have a chance to influence where you're going to work for the next 10 years, yeah, I would be angling to try to do that if it was me. Now, will it work? Do they have a plan? These are all good questions. Like, we will see what happens tonight. But I do think that, I can understand why any player would do that. And honestly, I'm a little surprised that we don't see more of that from guys at the very top of the draft. Like, famously, John Elway was like, I'm not playing for the Colts way back in the day, right? Eli Manning said, I'm not playing for the San Diego Chargers. Peyton Manning went back to the school, so he wants to play for the Jets. That has happened more in football than it's happened in the NBA, which is interesting. I don't really know why the answer is to that. But we haven't ever seen like a number, like say Cooper Flagg this year was like, I don't want to play for the Mavericks. I'm going to go somewhere else. Like, we just haven't really ever seen that before. But like I said, for a guy to have the next 9 or 10 years decided by some ping pong balls or a trade or a random thing like that, I could understand if somebody's like, I'd rather go somewhere else to try to get there. And by the way, the other thing too, Spence, is like, if the Sixers want to take Ace Bailey, nothing's stopping them from taking it, right? It's not like there's like any rule against it. If you didn't work them out, and I'm with you also. I know you weren't making a commentary on it. I think these workouts are silly, and there's voluminous evidence of what all these guys do in games. I would be a lot more interested in that than what they're doing in a random workout in May. But it's all part of the process. And again, it's one of many reasons why this draft night in particular is going to be pretty interesting.
All right, so since you and I last spoke, Oklahoma City culminated what, Tim, was a historic season, as you and others, McMahon and McMiniman and everybody that joins us from your outlet have outlined all year long. And maybe we should have been a little bit more frosty to the scenario and just given them their flowers instead of waiting to see if they could do what they just did. I'm always skeptical of a young group that has never had a deep playoff run, but they shut everybody up. And deserving champs. So we'll get to the Pacers side of it. The Halliburton stuff sucks. The East is wide open. But my two-tiered question for you, Tim, is what did Oklahoma City's championship say to you about where they are now and where they could be if they continue to make these savvy moves with surrounding this group with the right pieces?
This was the worst Thunder team that we'll probably see for the next 5 or 6 years.
Oh, dear.
Assuming barring health, and they won the title. That's what it said to me. Like, their second and third best players are 22. They have 13 players 27 and under. I think Alex Caruso is 31 and Kenrich Williams is 30, or vice versa. Every single other guy on the team is 27 or younger. They have the 15th pick in the draft tonight, and they're probably going to end up trading up into the lottery to get another guy. They have talent out the wazoo. They've got the best management team in the league. They've got an unbelievable ecosystem there of development and culture, and those guys playing together and being committed to the same goal. They've got the MVP of the league, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who just had one of the great seasons in the history of the sport, winning MVP, winning the scoring title, winning finals MVP. Like, there's 4 guys that have ever done that: Shaq, Michael Jordan, Kareem, and Shea. Like, that's a pretty damn good list, right? So, you start to look at where they're at. I mean, yes, they had people doubt them all year, like the 2014-15 Warriors. That's the team who they don't play the same way, and Shea doesn't play like Steph, but that's the team that they've reminded me of all year, a team that won 66 games, a team that was doubted all the way through. Frankly, a team that was doubted when they won the title because of some injuries in the finals, I think unfairly at the time, right? And they now have this young core, like that team with Draymond and Clay. These guys have Chet and Jalen Williams. They all should extend this summer. They're all going to be together a long time. And I'm very excited as a basketball fan for their future. And I'm also excited for the NBA that they won, because I think, this is now 7 straight years with a new champion. It's been 11 different teams out of a possible 14 in the finals over those 7 years. Both of those are records. At the same time, while this has been the NBA's era of parity, I think that era is over, very likely. And I think the Thunder are the new big kids on the block to take down. And if you look at the history of the NBA is typically better off, while parity is fun, when there is a giant to be slain. And I think this Thunder team does it the right way, and they're going to be awfully good for a long time. And I think they're fun to watch. And I think it's going to be very fun to see how the league tries to catch up to them and what it looks like for teams trying to take them down next year and the years to come after that.
So you tiered every team in the league, and I have your piece in front of me, and adjacent to that, I have the NBA Vegas odds. So the question I would like to ask you is who in the West lives in the same cul-de-sac as Oklahoma City? But the reality is the answer is probably nobody. Denver gave them the stiffest challenge in the postseason, but maybe Josh Kroenke is trading Nikola Jokic. That was a really weird thing to say yesterday. Obviously, I'm joking. He's not going to do that. The Vegas odds have Houston with KD now on the roster and Minnesota as the two teams in the West that have odds that are somewhat close, even though there's a big gap between OKC and the rest of the West. Who do you think next year can at least make them uncomfortable? And again, we'll just assume full health.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at that overall tiers piece I did the other day, I think the three teams in that next group. It's Houston, it's Denver, and it's Minnesota. And I would say probably either in that order or maybe Denver, Houston, and then Minnesota. Denver was one quarter away from probably beating Oklahoma City.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got Nikola Jokic. If they can add anything this summer and have some health in the playoffs, they'll have a chance. Nikola Jokic feels like LeBron did about 8-9 years ago, right? Every time he plays, he feels like the inevitable force. And he felt even like the inevitable force in that series. It just felt like they were going to find a way to win. And Oklahoma City summited at the end and won. But they'll be there to be heard from. And I think Houston, we'll see about Minnesota. I think they're a little bit farther away, especially if they lose players this offseason, which they probably will in some form, as they're getting pretty expensive. But I think Houston's going to be really good. I think Rafael Stone's done a really good job. The Fred VanVleet extension today is an example of that. You've seen a lot of teams kind of throw money around, and the Rockets have done, I think, an excellent job of properly paying their players, which sounds silly to talk about, but in the new economic reality that the league is in, every extra dollar you spend comes at a cost, and the Rockets really haven't spent any extra dollars anywhere. And even in the KD trade, they gave up as minimal a return as they could. They kept all their best young players. I really like their team. I think it was the one team that made sense for Kevin Durant to go to from a fit standpoint. I think he makes them a lot better just taking Jalen Green's minutes, which is basically what he'll do. And they've got a ton of athletic defenders around him to make it easier on him defensively. To this point of his career, he's not that much of an impact player at that end of the court. And look, I don't think they're going to beat Oklahoma City, but that would be an awfully, awfully fun series. Sign me up for a West Finals, not only with KD going back to OKC, but you've got, Shea and Jalen and Chet and Cason Wallace and all those dudes going up against Amen Thompson, who's an absolute house, and Jabari Smith and Tari Eason and Alperen Şengün and Fred VanVleet and Kevin Durant. That would be an awesome series and super fun to watch. And it could be a matchup we see for a few years now. So we will see where the summer goes. We'll see what other players move around. There's a lot that's still left to happen, including tonight. But I do think that Houston team is going to be awfully good, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see sort of what the next few weeks look like in terms of how the West shakes out and where things sit. But I'll take Houston and I'll take Denver, and I think both of them could end up giving Oklahoma City a lot of trouble.
Before I say you lose, Tim, let's move out east where no part of me will ever be a Pacer fan. I can't do it. I tried because I think it's a likable group, and I like Rick a lot. But tremendous respect for a team that nobody saw coming to get to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And I was gutted when I saw Tyrese go down like everybody else. I thought the same thing. I don't like to do the doctor thing as a sports talk radio host. But while we have to give them their flowers, Dame, Tatum, Tyrese, the injuries also indicate this conference could be wide open. I don't want to be disrespectful to any longtime assistant coach, nor would I be to a guy like Micah Nori. Jeff Van Gundy, once upon a time, an assistant coach who nobody knew about, who rose to become one of the best coaches in Knicks history. I don't know who's going to coach the Knicks. I don't know what the Cavs look like when the pressure's on. Orlando's intriguing, but Boston, Milwaukee, and Indiana are compromised. So before I set you loose, my two-part question is your thoughts on what we just saw from the Pacers, and how do you view the Eastern Conference in a vacuum next season?
I thought the Pacers were a remarkable story. I was definitely going to pick them to get out of the East again next year. I was really excited to see what they would look like next year. obviously, it was devastating to see Tyrese Haliburton get hurt. I mean, the way he plays, I'm at least pretty hopeful and optimistic that he'll be able to come back really well from this injury. And I think once he is back, a lot of the stuff they were doing is still going to be transferable, and they'll still be really good. Obviously, I'm assuming he and Jason Tatum aren't playing at all next year. The Bucks aren't good enough to be in the mix regardless. Obviously, Dame, it sucks seeing Dame get hurt too. Like, that was a brutal part of these playoffs, seeing those three guys go down. And I would say the East is just TBD right now. Like, it's very wide open. Let's see what happens with the Knicks. Let's see if the Cavs do something. Let's see what else Orlando does. Let's see what happens. Can Milwaukee make some moves? Does somebody else jump in the game and make a big swing for a trade? Like, nobody thought the Pacers were making a run last year the way they did, right? So it will be very interesting to see where the East looks, I would say 2 or 3 weeks from now. And it's probably a better time to answer that question because right now, the three teams at the top all have flaws, and there's not enough separation there to really say for certain how it's going to go until we see what some of these other moves are that take place.
Tim, appreciate the time. I know you're busy on draft day, so thank you for making some time for us. Enjoy the evening. We'll get you back on soon, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, the great Tim Bontemps covers the NBA for ESPN. Draft night tonight live at Barclays in Brooklyn. We'll move over to our live draft coverage when we say goodnight at 6 o'clock with Gordy Chase and Richard Smith. Start your engines. ESPN 700 is excited to announce the first ever Monster Jam World Finals coming to Utah July the 4th and the 5th. Listen to ESPN 700 for your chance to win tickets or visit Ticketmaster.com now before they're gone. All right, we'll catch our final break at the 2 o'clock hour. Coming up next, Rafael Barlow, who's now on the NBA big board side of things, took over for Chad Ford. We'll do a deep dive on all the prospects that are available for the Jazz and talk about his intel. Greg Bowler, Jack, a little bit later on. Spencer Linton stops by, too. We got a busy Wednesday show, and it's good to have you with us on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. All right, we're going to bring in the TV voice of the Utah Jazz, Craig Bowlerjack, to give us a little bit of a scene setter. Porter's going to be down live at the Zions Bank Basketball Center tonight. We'll have our live coverage of the NBA draft with myself anchoring the coverage with Richard Smith and Gordy Chiesa. Two guys combined have about 90 years of experience analyzing talent in pro basketball. Our next guest has a lot of experience analyzing talent in pro basketball as we go back to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, to chat with our guy, Rafael Barlow from the NBA Big Board. Rafael, happy draft day, man. How we doing?
I'm doing good. I'm not at the Barclays yet. I'm stuck in New York traffic, but man, I'll be there shortly.
Well, in that case, I feel like I could interview you for like an hour if you're stuck in New York traffic, right?
Man, it's bumper to bumper. I feel like I can take a skateboard and get there faster.
All right, I won't keep you for an hour, but let's get into it. What's your latest? I know what your latest mock says. I have it in front of me, but for our listeners, your latest mock draft has the Jazz drafting who and why?
I have them going with Ace Bailey. I know that that's not his preferred destination, but I can't imagine if he's there at 5 and he's the top 3 talent in this draft that Utah passes on him because that's not his preferred spot.
So if you're Austin Ainge, I suppose, Rafael, and you probably have just answered the question I'm going to ask you anyway, but you can't operate off of whether or not a young man wants to be here. I mean, we know the score, we know the deal, we know where the Jazz play, but if you're a roster constructor, you cannot have that stuff cloud your judgment. Is that fair to say? Like, if you think Ace is the best player and he's there at 5, you got to go with the best player.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I think that it's likely that if he's available that the Jazz go ahead and take him. There's been talk about he wants to go to like a bigger market to make up for possibly the lost money that he would lose if he by not choosing to go to Philadelphia. And so I think that Utah, besides like the geographical preferences, but Utah has what he's looking for as far as immediate playing time, a developmental curve, and a place where he can play through mistakes. So it makes sense to me.
So I've been in NBA draft workouts, several of them, NBA draft rooms as well. And with all due respect to the process, the workouts themselves oftentimes are a little bit silly. I mean, we've got tape on Ace from when he was 12. And these scouts have watched him play AAU ball, high school ball, college ball. Like, I don't know that you necessarily need individual workouts. I mean, it always helps to interview. They've got the medicals. They know the deal. But what do you make of the noise surrounding Ace as a result of him just refusing to work out for any NBA teams?
Yeah, I just think it's strategic on his agent's part. They have their destinations, and from everything that I've been told, it's either Washington, New Orleans, or Brooklyn. So they're just trying to find a way to make a power move to get to those preferred destinations. Of course, it's risky on any team's part if you draft a guy that doesn't want to be there, simply because you don't want all the chatter going into training camp or in the season, not on basketball, about whether or not he wants to be there. And maybe it's not as big as Harden in Philadelphia, but it got to the point where it just became a mess, and the owners ended up making a trade. So you don't want that scenario. But like I said, he's just too talented to pass up because you're afraid of just how he acts if he's not there. And I shouldn't say how he acts, just all the negative backlash.
So I'm going to take advantage of your knowledge and ask you about some of the prospects that other analysts have the Jazz taking at 5, just to get your take on it. Let's do Jeremiah Fears, because 3 different mocks, including Gavoni over at ESPN and Sam over at The Athletic, have the Jazz taking Jeremiah Fears at 5. So for our listeners' sake, for my sake too, somebody who does a deep dive in all this stuff, if the Jazz land Jeremiah Fears at 5, what sort of prospects should the fans know about?
You get a guy that I think is going to be a star in this league. He's younger. He reclassified up, and his Oklahoma team was predicted to finish 15th in the SEC. He led them to the NCAA tournament. He averaged 17 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists per game. He's able to consistently get 2 feet in the paint with his foot speed. And he's a guy that just is not afraid of the moment. He makes things happen. He had a game-winning shot against Michigan earlier in the year. So I think with Jeremiah Fears, if you land him, you get your point guard of the future and maybe like the alpha dog that I think Utah is missing.
And they're also missing, Rafael, in my opinion, a starting caliber point guard, with all due respect to Isaiah Collier, who there's some things to like about Isaiah. We talked to you about Isaiah during the process last year. But if you tell me that your lead guard that you play 34 minutes a night shoots 26% from three, I'm going to tell you got an issue. So do you believe an area? Well, the area of need is everything, quite frankly, depending on how you view Kessler and Markkanen. But I feel like the Jazz need their starting point guard. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like what Collier did. He was one of the steals of the draft. I thought he should have went higher last year. The concern with him has always been the outside shooting. And if you just look at the numbers right now, it may say that Jeremiah Fears is not a really good shooter, but I think he has good touch. He shot 85% from the foul line. And if you believe free throw shooting is a good indication of overall shooting touch and potential, then you have to be pretty optimistic about what Fears turns into in 3 or 4 years, maybe even sooner.
A couple of different mocks have Trey Johnson from Texas going to the Jazz at 5. You brought up Trey pretty early in the process when we visited with you maybe a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago now. So same question. If the Jazz land Trey at 5, what sort of prospect is he?
You get a bucket getter. I think Trey is the best shooter in the draft. And he's such a good scorer that people forget how good of a shooter he is. But he shot 39.5% from three on 6 attempts per game. And not a lot of those were just contested, wide open looks. So you get a guy that can score in the mid range. He can post smaller guards up. He's all about basketball, and that's key. You know, some guys, and there's nothing wrong with having interests outside of the court, but I live in Dallas, and I've been watching Trey for years, and he's a guy that is just all about basketball. And him and Keontae George know each other pretty well from being in the same area, so they could have their little chemistry on the court between those two guys.
Another name that's been linked by, well, one different outlet as of now is Con Knippel falling to the Jazz at 5. And I say falling because some people think Charlotte likes him at 4. So, of course, all of us around here were hoping that the Jazz had an opportunity to draft a player from Duke, but they didn't get the number 1 overall pick. So what sort of prospect should Jazz fans, what sort of prospect is Con Knippel for Jazz fans that are curious?
I think Con Knippel is one of the safer prospects in this class. He's a good shooter, shot 41% from three. He's tough. He's a connective passer. In my opinion, I don't think he has the same upside as some of the other guys, but I think he has a really high floor. And so with Knippel, I think he would help Utah, but I still think you would need like your A1, your alpha. I mean, Markkanen could be that guy, but I still think you would need your second scorer or your second best player to be able to get 20 to 25 a night. And I don't know if that's Knippel's role.
Before we move on to some other teams and some other players, the Jazz also have 21 tonight in the first round. So who does your mock have the Jazz taking at 21? And generally speaking, what sort of value do you think is there at that in that area in the draft?
Yeah, once we get to the 20s, I think it's going to be really, really tricky. I imagine there's going to be a lot of movement. So who I have Utah mocked at 21, they may not even be picking at 21. It could be some movement there. But I have Joan Beringer, and maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Maybe it's Beringay. I mean, my French is not the best. But he's a high – you can hear the New York City traffic. He's a high upside swing guy, a vertical lob threat, really athletic, still raw. I watched him play in a tournament in Dubai about a year ago, and I thought he was an NBA prospect, but I did not see 2025 NBA draft. So he's exceeded my expectations, and he's ahead of the curve. And what he would give Utah would be just a springy, young, vertical lob threat, a guy that is a 5, should be able to switch out and defend on the perimeter, and his role would just be as a vertical lob threat and a play finisher.
Do you anticipate chaos tonight? Do you anticipate movement tonight? Because there are a lot of rumors surrounding, the Jazz talking with the Celtics about Jaylen Brown. And there's a lot of synergies between these two front offices. Danny Ainge hired Brad Stevens. Austin Ainge worked for Brad for the past, 4 or 5 years or whatever while Danny was out here. Will Hardy was an assistant for Ime Udoka, so coached Jaylen Brown. There's also rumors of the Spurs maybe moving off of 2. I have a hard time believing that. I'm hearing they're asking for the world. But, is there a scenario in play where the Jazz kick the tires on 2? Is there a scenario in play where the Jazz look at Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics? Do you anticipate status quo tonight, or do you think we're going to see a lot of movement?
I think we're going to see a lot of movement. I feel like any trade that's been rumored probably doesn't happen outside of the Durant situation where we knew that he was going to be moved. But, hey, man, I live in Dallas. If Luka Doncic can be traded in the middle of the night, anybody can be traded. So I'm not going to say I don't think it's unrealistic. And then, obviously, the Celtics and Jazz front office, they know each other pretty well. They're on each other's Christmas list, Christmas gift card list or whatever. So I wouldn't be surprised. But at the end of the day, I just don't understand why Boston would move Jaylen Brown a year after winning a title. I guess they did it with Drew Holiday, but Jaylen Brown is young, still has a lot to give. But it would be a win for Utah for sure if you get Jaylen Brown.
All right. Is there any intrigue with the first 3 picks? Vegas is telling us as of now there's not. Do you feel like we're going to see any surprise, or is it just going to be Cooper, then Dylan, and then followed by VJ? Do you think that's just what we're going to see?
I think so. However, Daryl Morey is a guy that he may not care about all the noise, and he may do what I just mentioned that the Jazz could do. If Ace Bailey's sitting there at 5, Daryl Morey could indeed take Ace Bailey at number 3.
All right. Of all the comps or superlatives surrounding Cooper Flagg, what is your favorite? What's the most accurate? What sort of player do you think he'll be when he's fully developed in the NBA?
Man, that's a tough one. I'd say maybe – Cooper Flagg, he just is good in so many different areas. It's so many comps. Obviously you guys have heard the Andre Karolinko comps. There's some there. To me, maybe he's a smaller version of Kevin Garnett, right? Kevin Garnett, when he was at his best in Minnesota, but when he got to Boston, he may not have been their closer, he may not have been their leading scorer, but he was the engine behind everything. And I think Flagg could be similar to Garnett in the fact that he's able to impact the game with his scoring, with his rebounding, with his passing, and his defense.
What about Dylan?
He's not as big as Garnett for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What about Dylan at 2?
Maybe a combination of Jalen Brunson and post-Houston Rockets James Harden. So I don't think that he's going to be the guy that Harden was in Houston where he averaged about 35 a game. But if he's a consistent version of 2024-25 James Harden, obviously he's probably not going to shoot as many threes as Harden, but just a bigger guard. Now, he's not the playmaker as Harden, and I want to make that clear, but just a bigger point guard that can get downhill and generate a lot of trips to the foul line. So I see best-case scenario combination of those two.
Let me ask you about Malawach. Come on, Malawach, who one of our guys who will be on the draft coverage tonight, Richard Smith, likes an awful lot. Smitty spent 40 years with the Jazz front office. It doesn't make a ton of sense for the Jazz to draft him at 5 unless they're moving on from Kessler, and maybe they are. I'm not really sure what that direction is going to look like. But what's your analysis of Kaman Malawach, the kid from Duke, and who do you think grabs him tonight?
He can go in a lot of different directions. I've heard that the Pelicans would strongly consider him if Jeremiah Fears and Ace Bailey are off the board. I've heard Washington, if they want to go with a double big lineup, if they don't get Fears or Ace Bailey. The Pelicans, who I had mentioned, I just think he complements Zion. But best case scenario, he's a guy that can anchor your defense, protect the rim, be a vertical lob threat, a rim runner, finisher. But the main intrigue with him is how well he projects as a shooter. We didn't see it a lot at Duke, but we saw it in the Basketball Africa League. We saw him make a 3 or 2 in the Olympics, and he shot about 78% from the foul line. So like I said about Jeremiah Fears, if you believe that good free throw shooting is an indicator of touch, then you have to be pretty optimistic about Malawach's long-term potential as a floor spacer.
Really only one local player holding intrigue, and that's Yegor Demon, who played his college ball at Brigham Young for Kevin Young for a year. What are you hearing about where Yegor Demon might fall tonight?
I actually just talked to him probably about an hour ago, and he said he doesn't know, but he told me that he got a good night's sleep. He wasn't worried. I've seen Atlanta. Atlanta was a team that coming into this offseason, it was rumored that they were looking to address two needs. One was size up front. They needed a 7-footer and then a backup point guard. They made the move yesterday to get Kristaps Porzingis from Boston. So I think at 13 they'll target a backup point guard. It could be between Yegor Demon. It could be Kaspar Shakachonis from Illinois. But Yegor's draft range is wide. He might have the widest draft range in this class. I mean, there's some teams that really like him, and then there's some teams that aren't so sure about the shooting and even the ball handling. But I think his range could be anywhere from like 9 to 18.
You know, we've all experienced draft night where we've had to watch a player slide, sometimes all the way out of the first round. I call it the Rashard Lewis curse for old school NBA fans, and there's nothing more uncomfortable. You're just feeling so bad for the young prospect. Give me the Rafael Barlow take on the prospect most likely to slide. Anything you're hearing there?
I really haven't heard anything. That's kind of tough. Honestly, I have to see these parents and their families in a few minutes. So I don't know if I want to be aggregated by saying that I think someone's going to slide. I don't know. I mean, this draft is so unpredictable, and then there's also going to be a lot of movement and trades in the 20s. So I think the NBA did a good job of only inviting 24 guys to the green room, so that leaves somewhat of a cushion for a guy to be able to get drafted in the first round. I think it would be pretty rough for a guy that is invited to the green room and he has to come back on the second day. I mean, I don't even know if guys brought 2 suits. So I think everybody that was invited to the green room is anticipating being in the first round.
I want to ask you about Walter Clayton Jr., who won 2 state championships in high school, won a conference championship at Iona, and he was the MVP of the league, and then won a national championship in Florida. You know, talent evaluators fall in love with youth, and certainly for a team like the Jazz, who are a long way away from even being kind of good, I understand why you would lean towards an 18 or a 19-year-old. I know he's a little bit older, but the kid just wins wherever he's at. And there's a little like Jamal Murray-ish, like shot-making ability that he has. What do you think about the prospect of Walter Clayton Jr. in pro basketball? And generally speaking, where do you think he's going to land tonight?
Yeah, I think he'll end up in the 20s somewhere. I was actually shocked that he received a green room invite, especially over Jace Richardson. Like you mentioned, that we always kind of fall in love with youth, and sometimes we overanalyze guys that have 4 or 5 years of college experience. But Walter Clayton Jr. is a shot maker. He's a winner. He's fresh off a national championship. There are some concerns whether or not he's an NBA point guard. He only played point guard 1 season at Florida. He's more so of a scorer and shot maker. I've even had an SEC coach tell me that because most of his shots are off the dribble, and usually guys who prefer to score a lot off the dribble are starters. And so he wondered if he's playing like an off-the-bench role, and if he's playing a reduced role, is he going to have the freedom to play how he played at Florida with a lot of pull-up jumpers and step backs and so on. So I think he'll be drafted in the first round. But I think how well he performs, it's a vague answer here, but I think fit is going to be really, really important for him.
We've seen locally and nationally a tremendous amount of star players that have been found in mid-lottery, late first round. You know, John Stockton, Karl Malone, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Gordon Hayward. I could keep going. And the Oklahoma City Thunder just won a championship, and their linchpin was not a top 5 pick. Kawhi Leonard. We could continue to list names, as you know. Give me a name, Rafael, of a player that you think will not be drafted top 5, top 8, that may slide mid-lottery or late first round, that we'll be talking about in 5-6 years as a guy that should have been drafted higher.
I would go with Stanford's Maxime Reynaud. I've been called an industry plant just because I'm so high on Reynaud. But I just think he's been hiding in plain sight. He was second in the ACC in scoring, first in rebounding. He's a 7-footer. He averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds. He made the most threes in NCAA history by a 7-footer. And a guy that you're familiar with, Lauri Markkanen, is the one that holds that record. And then he's also a late bloomer. Started playing basketball late, was a swimmer growing up in France. And he entered college basketball on a partial scholarship. So within the last 4 years, he's transformed himself to a 20-11 guy in a power conference. So I think he's just been hiding in plain sight. He had a good NBA combine. And then all of a sudden, you started seeing his name rise in first rounds on different mocks. But he's been doing that all year long. So he's a guy that I think a lot of people are just not giving enough credit for how good he is.
All right, before I set you loose, I wanted to ask you about one more prospect, just kind of selfishly, as we kind of figure out how this thing is going to go down. And I've heard a bunch of different people discuss the potential, and we'll have to see what happens in front of them. But I think it's Noah Insegwe, the French kid, who is thought to be a top 10 prospect. But for our listeners, Raphael, an interesting story came down. And I honestly don't know how to land on it because this is the dream of all of these young men. All these young men want to play NBA basketball. None of these young men care about winning a championship in Germany. But in Sengwe's team, he's a French prospect who plays for a German team that's playing for the German championship, and he's leaving them during their competition to be here at the draft. Like I said, I'm not sure that I blame him, but what sort of noise are you hearing as to whether or not that would dissuade teams from taking a look at him?
Well, I spoke with his agent yesterday about it, and actually I knew about this at the Combine. His agent had mentioned to me that there's a chance that this could possibly happen if they ended up going 5 games into the German League Finals, and everything was approved by the team. The team knew it, and I even think that because he's not from Germany, he's from France, and Radio Farm Ulm, the team he plays for, is known for taking chances on young players. They're actually probably the only team in Europe that will play young guys that aren't afraid to go with them. And so I think they knew that this was a possibility. And from everything that I've heard from his agent, this was planned. It wasn't like he just up and left and they didn't know about it. So he's here. I saw him yesterday. He was at the media day. And I understand that he's going to take a PR hit behind it. There's been some pretty major publications that have questioned just how committed he would be to a team because of this move. But I'm torn on it myself. You only get one opportunity to be drafted, one opportunity to shake Adam Silver's hand. But on the other hand, I get how someone could say that this was a little bit selfish of him.
All right, Raphael, tell everybody on draft day where they can go find your work.
You can find me at NBABigBoard.com. That is my newsletter. I have a post-draft recap, I guess, in a few hours. And then I have a podcast, Locked On NBA Big Board. You can find that on YouTube. So just type in NBA Big Board, and I'm pretty easy to find. Thanks,
buddy. Appreciate the time. Travel safe in that traffic and enjoy draft night, okay?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
Raphael Barlow, NBA Big Board, took over for Chad Ford after Chad left that project, and he stops by today courtesy of our friends at Advanced Windows. You can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. It's a great local company operated by Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, legend at the U, and longtime NFL player in conjunction with his buddy Jake Weber. Ultimately, they do an excellent job. And I've been on remote there, and we've had them in studio. They're really, really good people. And they are here to take care of you as a member of our community. So the nice thing is if you need windows now, you can save $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. If the weather is too hot and your house is super warm, you're probably jacking up the AC and spending a ton of money on the bills side of things. So save a little money, get some new windows. You can save money on your bills, on your utilities, and you can also save money on the project itself. But the nice thing about this offer is if you anticipate being in the market in a couple of months, maybe you're going to buy or sell a home in the fall when school starts, or you're going to wait until it's cold to make sure it's solidified. If you call today and get on the schedule, you still lock in the savings because it won't last forever. So you can save $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Warranties that are transferable to a new homeowner, lifetime warranties at that. They make everything in-house. I've seen their warehouse. It's amazing. And why you need to know that is it cuts out the middleman. You save a grip of money that way as well. So here's the deal. Give them a call today, whether you need windows now or later, to save $2,500 when you buy 10 or more. Here's the number. It's 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or simply online at advancedwindows.com. All right, about 30 minutes from now, we'll bring in Craig Bolerjack. We'll do more Jazz basketball, NBA draft. Spencer Linton stops by. It was a big day for BYU football yesterday. We'll do some Yegor Demon, some college basketball. Launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program. Then we'll say goodnight at 6. And after we say goodnight for our afternoon drive program, we will start our draft coverage, where I'll anchor the show. James will be producing, and then we'll have Gordy Chiesa and Richard Smith alongside to help us analyze everything, start to finish. Smitty and I tomorrow will do the second round as well. So we got a busy couple of days on the program, busy couple of days on the station. No reason for you to go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Bowler on the show today on the other side of 4 o'clock. Talk some Jazz basketball, what he's hearing on his end, as it is a big day. It's a big day for the Jazz. It's a massive night for the Jazz. When you have a top 5 pick, got to take advantage, man. We'll do some college football and some college basketball with Spencer Linton before we get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program. And then we'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock and make way for our draft coverage. We'll have the best coverage in the market by far. I'll be anchoring the coverage. It'll be Gordy Chase and Richard Smith along for the ride. A combined 90 years of experience evaluating talent for pro basketball teams, namely the Utah Jazz. So stay tuned for that. Good stuff from Tim Bontemps live on site today. Rafael Barlow stopped by as well. Rafael does the NBA Big Board. A lot of noise surrounding Ace Bailey and the Utah Jazz potentially selecting Ace Bailey tonight at 5. Should he be there available for them? And it feels like he's going to. I don't know if it's a consensus outside of the top 3, but it does feel like everything that I'm reading at this point has Cooper Flagg off the board at 1, has Dylan Harper off the board at 2 to San Antonio, of course, Cooper to Dallas. And then VJ Edgecombe appears to be the pick at 3 for the Philadelphia 76ers. Of course, Daryl Morey has proven before to be a wild card and certainly could be a wild card tonight. Con Knipple at 4. It seems to be a lot of momentum in that direction, which leaves the Jazz in a very advantageous place. So, okay, we got a little breaking news, Porter. Say that again. Go ahead.
John Collins. Not that this is a surprise at all, Spencer. A report from Shams Charania, $26.5 million player option. As we've talked about a lot, you're going to take that if you're John Collins, and apparently as of right now, he is exercising that option.
Yeah, not too much of a surprise. I mean, it's not like the Jazz were going to extend John Collins at big money. So this just means John will play on an expiring deal, which is a nice bargaining chip for Austin Ainge and the Utah Jazz. Probably tough to move John after they first acquired him from Atlanta. Remember, they gave nothing to the Hawks. The Hawks were like, if you want him, he's yours. They didn't have to give up anything for John Collins. And he's kind of like this perfect vet because he's not a good player. He's not a bad player, but he does fill a salary cap spot. Got to pay players. You have to. There's not just a salary cap ceiling. There's a salary floor that you have to meet as an NBA organization. So, John, I think, played pretty well for Will last year, about as good as could be expected for a guy that has the limitations that John Collins does. I don't think it means anything that's paramount to the process tonight, but we could be wrong because if there's a deal on the table, we'll use the Jaylen Brown example because several people have reported that the Jazz and the Celtics are currently discussing the framework of a deal that could land Jaylen Brown in Salt Lake City to play for the Jazz. And just for salary matching purposes, and also the dynamics we've already discussed, like the only way it makes sense for the Jazz to make a deal for Jaylen Brown is if they find a way to hold on to their other good players. Because it's a linear move if you have to move off of like Markkanen and Kessler and draft capital in exchange. And by the way, Boston wouldn't do that anyway because their motivation for moving on from Jaylen is to shed salary. So they don't want Lowry's long-term deal. At least that would be my guess. Walker Kessler's up for an extension. Quite frankly, this year, you can extend Walker if you want. So any framework of a deal wouldn't include Markkanen and Kessler, and it couldn't from the Jazz side of things because you'd just be spinning your wheels and moving in a linear direction if you move off your other good players, because if you're Jaylen Brown, you want to play with good players. You want to play for a team that's actually trying to win something. It continues to not resonate with me on the Boston side of things. I just wouldn't do it because the framework of a deal would include John. It would include John Collins for salary purposes. It would probably include Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, and then, 3 to 4 picks. And the Jazz certainly have those picks to offer. So that would be the framework of it. And if you do add Jaylen Brown to a Lowry Markkanen, Walker Kessler front court, then you got something. You're not Oklahoma City, you're not Houston, you're not Denver, you're not Minnesota, but maybe you're something other than simply just a play-in team. Maybe you are the 6th or the 7th, best team in the West. That's still tough based off of how stacked the West is. Notice I listed teams, and I didn't even list the one that has LeBron James and freaking Luka Doncic. Or an owner with $140 billion, namely Steve Ballmer, who has shown his willingness to pay a lot of money for his roster. Now, ironically enough, the CBA And the second apron, which has caused so many teams to make so many difficult decisions, actually did affect the Clippers. But it wasn't monetary reasons. Like the second apron punitive nature isn't just economic. You can have draft picks taken away. You can have draft picks frozen. It hinders your ability to change your roster. It hinders your ability to pivot. So it's not just economic. It's also you can't use your taxpayer mid-level exception. You have draft capital potentially taken from you. Your ability to add to your group is essentially cut off underneath your knees, right? And so when the information came out about how punitive this stuff was from a roster construction standpoint, the Clippers said goodbye to Paul George. I mean, they were adversely affected, not because Steve Ballmer is not willing to write checks for his team. It's because organizationally, you don't have the ability to really pivot and change your group. You kind of are who you are. Now, I want to be clear. I think this is too punitive. I think the league has gone too far the other direction. And now they're penalizing teams for building excellent rosters too punitively. I understand the motivation. And as we do radio here in Salt Lake City, you know, it is a good thing for teams that live in challenging places to build teams. And that's what we have here in Salt Lake. It's also led to the parity that they've been looking for. We just crowned the seventh straight champ, seven straight different NBA champ over the past 7 years. It's never happened before. So mission accomplished if you're Adam Silver. But I look at this through the prism of what Denver built with Jokic and how they had to say goodbye to rotational pieces in consecutive years that has really hindered them. When Denver won that championship, remember, there were conversations because I think Jokic was 26 when they won the title. It's like, dude, can Denver run off like 3 or 4 straight? Well, they couldn't afford to keep Bruce Brown. They couldn't afford to keep Jeff Green. Couldn't afford to keep Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They let a lot of good rotational pieces walk. And they tried to plug holes with young players, some of whom were. Christian Brown's a good player. But they bring in Russell Westbrook on a veteran minimum deal, and it was atrocious. So I know that Westbrook had moments, but Westbrook always has moments. He doesn't impact winning for a player that puts up those numbers that you would like to see. Like, for a guy that has averaged a triple-double in a season and won an MVP, the Russell Westbrook storyline and conversation when he is done playing will be fascinating because he is going to the Hall of Fame. But you can't win with him. He's not going to win a ring. You can't win championships if Russell Westbrook is on your roster and he's playing more than like 10 minutes a night. So we've seen the second apron adversely affect the Denver Nuggets. We've seen it adversely affect the Golden State Warriors. We've seen it adversely affect the LA Clippers. But like if you're, a project that was started by Danny Ainge and continued by Brad Stevens, the Boston Celtics built up an insanely good roster that should have put them in the mix to win championships for like 6 years. And in a way it did. They went to, I think, 5 conference finals with Tatum and Brown, 2 NBA finals, and they did get their chip. But for a team that built a roster like that, to essentially have to break it down honestly feels a little unfair. Like you're telling these roster constructors and these talent evaluators, like, okay, you've got to go build the framework of a championship contender in this ecosystem with the guidelines we're giving you. And then when they do it, you're telling them that essentially you have to break it down or you have no ability to change your team. I'm not a huge fan. I hope when the new CBA expires in 2030, they actually look at some different avenues. Now, the problem is, if you're the Jazz, right now is the best time in the history of this league for an organization that exists in a city like Salt Lake to be able to get into the game. We just saw Oklahoma City win a championship, and they beat the Indiana Pacers, who exist in Indianapolis, 2 small markets. The Minnesota Timberwolves, according to the Vegas odds, are the 3rd favorite to win the West next year. Minneapolis, not a desirable free agent destination. And I could keep going. It's Milwaukee with Giannis. It's Denver with Jokic. It's a lot of these teams that exist in smaller places and NBA cities that aren't free agent destinations that have been able to operate under the guidelines of what the NBA puts in place to build championship teams. And unfortunately, the Jazz are so far away that when the new CBA expires in 2030, it might be too late. They've got a lot of work to do. So John Collins has exercised his $26.5 million player option, but we really can't underscore the importance of tonight. Top 5 pick. Of course, the Jazz were hoping as a result of really, being very intentional, losing basketball games this year to get more lottery luck than they did. But unfortunately, they fall where they fall. And the 4 losingest teams in the league this year all slid. None of them are drafting in the top 4, actually outside of Charlotte. But the top 3 picks are made by teams that actually are ready to do something pretty special right away. Dallas's situation is really, really interesting because we don't see generational players like Cooper slide into this ready-made to win experience. Like LeBron back in 2003 when he's the number 1 pick, the Cavs were so bad. They actually had to move off some pieces because there were some veteran players that didn't think LeBron deserved the role that he was given. And when he was able to make that first Cavs team actually decent and go to the NBA Finals, go back and look at that roster. It's wild how unprepared they were to be serious about competing. And mostly when there's a number 1 pick, he goes to a team that is a long, long way from doing anything special. Dallas will have something to say about the West as soon as next year. Well, the Kyrie stuff hurts. Kyrie's not going to play. But Kyrie, by the way, opted out of his contract, a $43 million option that he declined, and signed a 3-year, $119 million contract. It's team-friendly. It actually allows Dallas to use the taxpayer mid-level exception because they need to find a point guard this year. And maybe they look at Colin Sexton from the Jazz. Tim McManus reported that on the show. They need to find somebody to kind of keep the ship afloat while Kyrie is rehabbing that Achilles injury. But you look at Anthony Davis, who's a Hall of Fame player and an NBA champion. You know, you look at Klay Thompson, who's a Hall of Fame player and an NBA champion, and Jason Kidd, who is highly respected as a head coach. And then when Kyrie comes back, like Cooper does not have to go to Dallas and be the world for them. He just doesn't. And that's a great, great spot for him. You know, we talk about this through the prism of pro football all the time. And the most recent example, which is a polarizing one with a local tie, is Zach Wilson going to the Jets. I don't think Zach was ever going to be a great starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he ever will be. But it didn't help that he landed with the Jets, and as a Jet fan, I can tell you, is an organization of dysfunction. And ultimately, you know, it is about the individual talent, but it's also about the fit and the front office and ownership and the coaching staff and their ability to develop players. I think a lot of people will always wonder, and there's a little Jimmer Fredette stuff here as we're sitting here on draft day, when BYU fans love to be the revisionist historians to say, like, well, he landed in the right spot. Keith Smart didn't like him. Or he landed in the wrong spot. Keith Smart didn't like him. Sacramento, what? No, like he had ultimately 5 or 6 NBA opportunities to just prove that he was at least a rotational piece. He was never going to be a ball dominant, like lead the NBA in scoring. He was never really, in my opinion, even going to be a starter. But could Fredette crack a rotation in pro basketball? The answer was an emphatic no. And so when BYU fans do the whole like, hey, Zach didn't land, like it's the same thing. He's going to get an opportunity in Miami, and he probably will be able to start some games this year because Tua doesn't stay healthy very much. And I don't think it's going to look great, but I do make space for the argument, like what would Zach Wilson have looked like if he landed with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, right? And so when it comes to fits, when it comes to coaching staffs, when it comes to front offices, if you're the agent of one of these players, you have to weigh a number of different things out about the destination that you would prefer for your client and for these young men that are about to be drafted. Because remember, it's not about the rookie contract. Like one of the cool things about draft night, one of the things I like about it the most is I've always enjoyed watching the lives of people change in real time instantly. Winning a lottery, winning a bunch of money, winning something special. NCAA tournament, you know, smaller schools that make the NCAA tournament and somehow advance 2 rounds, and the coach gets hired by Syracuse or whatever, you know, a big school, and suddenly his life changes. The lives of these young men will change tonight, but they really change with generational wealth, with the second contract and the third contract, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the motivation, if you're an agent or if you're on a team kind of advising any of these young men, is longevity and is the right spot for the long haul, not the right spot for a year or two. Remember, Fredette didn't even have his final year of his rookie contract picked up. That never happens. The only time that happens is when the front office realizes they made a tragic mistake. Like they didn't even give him one more year to develop. They're like, we've seen enough. Ultimately, we can't draft him. So the Jazz are in a good spot with a front office that is well respected and a head coach that appears to be a guy that is fit for this job. And so hopefully, whether it's Ace Bailey or Trey Johnson or et cetera, this front office and this coaching staff can develop this young prospect and hopefully be here for the long haul. Because, again, as we talk about all the time, what this organization has been able to do is really capitalize on 2/3 of the formula that you need to build a roster in pro basketball, which is draft, develop, and retain. Now, the recent returns of draft picks have, if we're honest, have been not good at all. Whether it's Isaiah or Keontae or Kyle, there are some things to like about a few of them, but the 2 top 10 picks, Taylor Hendricks, unfortunately, has not been able to stay healthy so far. And Cody Williams, honestly, had a historically pathetic rookie year. So there's a lot of pressure on Austin Ainge and the Jazz to get this right tonight. We will launch into our draft coverage beginning at 6 o'clock. All right, we'll catch our final break at the 3 o'clock hour. Craig Bowler-Jack is our guest to start things off during the 4 o'clock hour. But let's welcome in Chris Mehmet. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Ute Stampede Rodeo. Chris Mehmet joins us on a Wednesday. Chris, I apologize. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks. It's great to talk to you, Spence.
I appreciate you hopping on. So tell us about the Ute Stampede Rodeo. What do we need to know?
Well, specifically, we're talking about the bull riding that's on Wednesday the 9th. It's extreme bulls, and it's you're talking about draft day today. This is like the kind of the cream of the crop of the PRCA bull riding guys that come in and ride only bulls that night, and it's all for $35,000 on a one-night deal, and really a great ticket, a great night with your family. Hopefully everybody will come out and join us.
Okay, when is it? Where is it? And where can people go get tickets, Chris?
Okay, it's on July 9th, and our website is stampederodeo.com.
All right, Chris, I appreciate the time. We'll make sure to send people to the website, and I'll look forward to being down there myself. Thank you, sir.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Spence.
All right, Chris Mehmet, Ute Stampede Rodeo. Go to utestampederodeo.com, July the 9th through the 12th in Nephi, Utah. You ever ridden a bull?
I have ridden a mini bull. I've never stayed on for 8 seconds before, though.
A mini bull. So is that like a baby bull? Is that exactly what it sounds like?
Not a baby. They're literally like a genetically mini. And when I was a child, that was what you tried to get on at the Francis Frontier Days rodeo.
That sounds dangerous.
100%.
So wait, as a young child, you went to rodeos where other children were allowed to ride mini bulls?
Or you just get on, you call it mutton busting, which you get on a sheep and it just flails around the entire arena and smashes you up against the fence. Yeah, that's what we call good time in rural Utah.
Now, you did say mutton busting with an M, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's
I may have misheard you.
Breaking some sheep.
Okay, so as a young Porter Larson and his peers,
you're going to need pictures, aren't you?
Well, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. You were allowed to ride mini bulls and sheep that threw you around the arena, and you clearly were falling in with potential of being hurt.
Yes, I believe probably. Parents signed some documents, but I'm not totally sure on that. Can't confirm.
Did you have to pay for the right to get your ass kicked on these animals?
So sometimes, I'm sure. Maybe a donation. You used to, they throw out like chickens or oiled up pigs at some of the events.
Okay.
And you go down there, you give them a quarter, you give them a 50-cent piece, and you get to chase the oiled up pig and maybe take it home to your farm.
Well, they'd charge you more than $50 or 50 cents to take the pig home, wouldn't they?
No, you get it for free. It's the competition.
Wait, so you give them 50 cents, you chase a pig, and if you catch it, you can take it home?
I don't know exactly how all of the events go, but that was one of them, yes. The Ute Stampede, though, pretty specifically, especially on the Wednesday, they're doing just PRCA bull events.
Okay.
And then they got the full 4-day PRCA rodeo.
Will parents have the ability to allow their kids to ride mini bulls and then mutton busting with sheep?
I don't think so. 4th of July weekend in Oakley, come up there. I got you.
You know that's my jam.
I got you covered.
The Oakley Rodeo, and then I've told you before, the Demolition Derby was my favorite. Like these weirdos, crazy people just crashing their cars into each other. Mm-hmm. I thought it was fascinating as a kid.
Yeah, those are people I grew up with. That's all the neighbors.
I have an idea for a side hustle for you.
Derby?
Rodeo clown. Be the dude that chases the bull away from killing the cowboy and then fool it into killing you.
You would be surprised how many people have told me I should do that and not like they're not joking.
Well, you're
it's like
agile.
a serious.
You're agile. You're fast. You're athletic. And I would imagine they get paid a little cash, right?
Oh yeah, the good bullfighters. There's a title here.
Okay.
They actually get paid really good.
Wait, the clowns are called bullfighters?
There's different avenues here. See, now we're getting deep into the rodeo stuff.
It's not my world. You have to educate me.
There are for sure like rodeo clowns that are like part of the performance. They usually got a mic on. They're funny. They do acts in between events.
Okay.
But there's also bullfighters who are very different. They're paid to literally, as you were mentioning, protect the guys who are getting bucked off, and they're way more involved. They're like right up at close and personal during the bull riding.
Are they also dressed as clowns?
Usually, but they're way more athletic and I don't want to say competent, but resourceful.
You're blowing my mind. So wait a second. How do I decipher between the clown that's funny for the show and the clown that's really trying to save people's lives?
You can tell. Now you just got to pay attention. The clown that's just trying to be funny, probably got a big stupid hat on and a microphone.
Okay.
He's not making his money as much as our bullfighter friends.
All right.
There's a Hall of Fame for the bullfighters too.
I'm telling you, you should look into this. A side hustle. We would all come watch you be a bullfighter dressed as a clown trying to save Cowboys' lives.
All right. I'll look into it.
UtestampedeRodeo.com. The Ute Stampede Rodeo will be July the 9th through the 12th in Nephi, Utah, so definitely check it out. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go for afternoon drive. We will say goodnight at 6, then launch into our draft coverage. We'll be on air, I don't know, probably till like 8, I guess. So we'll catch a break, and then coming up on the other side, we'll bring in the voice of the Jazz. Craig Bolerjack is our guest on a Wednesday drive. So keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. Just under 2 hours away from the beginning of the NBA draft. We will have excellent draft coverage for you here on the station. We'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Then it's going to be time for myself, Gordy, Chiesa, and Richard Smith. Smitty and Gordy combine like 90 years of experience analyzing talent. Take you through the entire first round tonight, and then tomorrow night it'll be just Smitty and I. We'll give Gordy the night off. But technically our NBA draft coverage has begun, and it will continue. And it's just simply been too long since we've heard a little Def Leppard on the program, which means it's time for our conversation with the great Craig Bowler. Jack Bowler, happy Wednesday, man. How you been?
Hey, pal, good to hear from you. You got a nice lineup tonight, man. You're right. Smitty and Gordy, come on, man. That goes way back. That's a combination there.
Yeah, no, excited for it. We'll have a good time, Bowler. So, look, we know that you're not the general manager, but you're, of course, the voice of the team, and you work with the club. So, what are you hearing? What's your understanding about what we could expect tonight from the Jazz?
You know what? There's always little whispers and rumblings and, all of this chat. And, we talk to other people around the league and, get their take on what the Jazz are about and just the West, basically. And I just heard your last take from tearing down the bus. Was it the Celtics to the studs? There's a lot of talk in Boston tonight, too. There's a lot of talk everywhere. But I think the Jazz are aggressive. I'd be stunned if they're not. Look, Spence, obviously – we talked about this before in other years, and I think this is one of, if not, the most important summer draft of the Jazz. Look, they brought in Big T in '83. They had Mark there. They had then Stockton in '84, Malone in '85. It was a process, but for just one particular draft, I think this thing is big. You got the 5 pick. Last year you won 17. The fans were all in on the growth factor of a Walker Kessler. They saw the emergence of Isaiah Collier. They saw what Filipowski can do. Obviously upset that Taylor Hendricks was injured, and you really couldn't get a good feel of what his talent level is. Cody Williams disappointed a bit, but, when you're top 10, expectations are high. So I think with Austin Ainge now, Spence, at the helm, and the assets that Danny hands to him, there's a lot of possibilities tonight. I think it's a busy night. We'll talk tomorrow, and I could be totally wrong, but the opportunity to be busy with a 5-21 tonight, and do you move up from 21? Do you make some late deals or deals during the draft? I think it's busy. At least that's kind of the buzz that I've heard and people I've talked to.
So the Austin factor is interesting, Craig, for a few different reasons. I don't know that I would go as far as to say unprecedented, but I will use the adjective unique for an owner to hire the new decision maker mere weeks before potentially the biggest draft this organization has seen in a number of years. And look, it's not like Austin doesn't know the staff. He might know Danny. That's my guess. He might know Danny Ainge pretty well, and I'm sure he knows Zanuck and everybody else. Like, it's not like this is a random Eastern European scout that you brought over to run the team. Like, people know Austin. Austin knows people. I'm not saying it's completely new as far as relationships go, but it is new as far as the loudest voice in the room being hired weeks before the draft. What sort of dynamic do you think that brings into play?
That's a great question. I'm with you. I think it's a tough position for Austin Ainge to take. Obviously, embrace the moment, opportunity once in a lifetime to recharge, rebuild a franchise. But you talk about doing quick homework. Look, he's in the East. Yes, his dad's been with the Jazz for multiple years now with Ryan at the helm. But, your focus is on Boston at the time, and your focus is on Eastern Conference teams, and obviously something about the West. But now you're in a deep dive here. And maybe you work your magic in the East with player subtractions or additions, and moving a player here or moving a player there and using your contacts. It's really about contacts, Spence, as you know from, your dad with the Jazz and everything in New York. I mean, I think it's really how do you use your insight, your contacts, and can you move one chess piece to appease you and help appease another? And I'm guessing Austin's got to be pretty good at that to be in a position where he was with the Celtics. He learned from Danny. He's been with Brad Stevens, and tonight he'll be on full display. Well, I'm heading down right now to the Zions Bank basketball campus, and I'm anxious to see if I can get a minute with him, because that's kind of the question I had too: is where are you at? And there's draft picks available, 9 I believe in all, that rank up to 2031, second round picks as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for him to move and make deals, but does he actually use them tonight, or is it down the road? How aggressive, Spence, is my question, does he want to be? And really, how aggressive does Ryan want him to be? Hockey's on the upswing. The Jazz Nation, I thought last year, did a remarkable job. We've talked a lot about this during the season, that when you were there and dropped by the booth, I mean, you were impressed. I was impressed. I thought Delta Center hung tough throughout the entire season with watching the young guys grow. And I keep going back to the time, too, when Will Hardy said earlier in his career that, this isn't an easy place to work. I mean, the NBA is for the elite. Some will make it, some will not. Who has the guts to put the work in? And we're probably going to start seeing 3 years now into Will's career as the head coach, the data points, the data is all in on these picks that Will was a part of. And I think the question is, we might get some answers here in the next week, maybe tonight, who stays, who goes, and, who is going to be a part of the core. And I think those are big questions that have to be answered. And you know what? Austin Ainge is going to help answer them.
The other dynamic, Craig, that this brings into play with Austin is now the decision maker, is he did not draft any of the players
Right.
that have been drafted over the past few years. He did not trade for Lowry. He did not trade for Walker. Literally 0 of these players have Austin's fingerprints on them, which leads me to believe there are 0 players on the roster that he views as untouchable. And I think that's fair. I mean,
Right.
I don't want to dismiss and diminish and disrespect a veteran like Lowry or a young player like Walker. But outside of those 2, and maybe even including those 2, I'm not sure that Austin views anybody as, okay, they have proven to me that they are part of this thing long term, which really brings everything into play, and it makes it kind of fun.
Yeah. You know what? That's another great point. In any business, and you've been involved, I've been involved, CBS for me, new people come in, they make change. They put someone that they do have a fingerprint on, and then there's an untouchable on occasion. But same at Fox, same at KSL. Radio's no different. And, I go back to Dennis Lindsay. He was very protective. You remember of a guy, that came out of Australia, Dante. And it was tough for him to admit it wasn't going to work. And that's what you just alluded to, is the fingerprint of protecting your pick, because it reflects on your decision-making. And if you go someplace else, then you say, look what I did. And I think you make a great point. These players are players, and I know Danny and Austin during the process respects that. But at the same time, I think the way the business is run is that, you know what, if I got to move you, that's just part of the business. And, the relationship probably is not, let's just call it what it is. It can't be that strong. He hasn't had a chance to even get to know them as much as he would have liked. Had he drafted him, it's a totally different ballgame. Will Hardy's invested because he's coached all these guys and helped develop and watch their maturation. But, yeah, Austin's in a position, Spence, I think is a great point. He could make moves without a lot of emotion attached. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of GMs have trouble moving a pick that they actually brought in, or a free agent that they made, that they brought in as well. So I think tonight, maybe not as an emotional one for Austin, but yet, let's be honest, the pressure's on. I think there's a lot of pressure to push this team ahead.
Well, and Austin's dad, Danny, at his introductory press conference when he was announced as the CEO of Jazz basketball, and I always chuckle when I bring this line up. It just made me laugh because I've known Danny since I was a kid. He said, "You all should know that I remove emotion from decision-making when it comes to roster construction. Then he traded Donovan, and he traded Rudy. Like he broke the whole thing down, And so I would imagine Austin operates very much in the same mold as his pops.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And you know what? We may get our first real hint of that tonight if the right situation approaches. I still think most GMs, not all, are working on that same basis, Spence, trying to let not the emotions dictate what moves they make. There's been cases where I think maybe a player has stayed too long because of that tie to a franchise. But if the Jazz need to make a break, I would think this would probably mean the most opportunistic time because of a new, you just said it. He's the loudest voice in the room tonight. And it's going to be really interesting what direction and just how loud that voice is, because there are plenty of opportunities to move vets, to also use picks to improve your position and be more aggressive. If they stay at 21, I may be surprised. I think I would be. I think if there's a player that really they feel like is perfect fit, and they have to go to 15 to get him, maybe that's the case because they have the assets at least to be in the conversation. And for all indications on all the websites you've been on, I've been on, the Jazz keep popping up on occasion about being, calls are being fielded. And that's interesting because a lot of times that information doesn't leak out because, back from your dad's time to Scotty Layden and Kevin O'Connor, Dennis, man, it's like playing, I wouldn't want to play poker with them because they are as straight-faced and tight-lipped as they can be. And that's their job because they got to protect the players that are on the roster and not interfere, with the relationships. But it's kind of a touchy ground to try to work your way around all those issues of feel good relations, but yet still talking about a player potentially moving or, bringing another guy in.
So, without knowing the mindset of the organization and what direction they're going to go, it does make it difficult to analyze what they should or should not do tonight, because are they going to try to expedite this process? Are they going to try to use their assets to bring in a vet? Are they going to simply just go young? And, Austin said during his opening press conference in response to our very own Sean O'Connell's question that he will not be manipulating minutes for draft capital this year. And that's fine, but you do have a top 8 protected pick that goes to, Oklahoma City, who, just won a championship this year if you fall out of the top 8. So there's a fine line to walk. But as somebody who has a front row seat to all of this, there's the old draft cliche, best player available or, somebody you draft to fit a need. It feels like they need everything. But if we operate off the premise that they feel really good about Markkanen and Kessler, maybe what they don't need is a big. But, at 5, I haven't really heard outside of the Malawatch kid from Duke any bigs linked to them. Do you feel like that they are solidified anywhere that would motivate a decision to take one player over the other based off of need? Or do you think they just need to take the very best player possible at 5?
Defense is a lot of things in this league, and so is three-point shooting. So, you're always looking for a 6'6" guy with wingspan and beyond, and who can knock down a triple. That would be a player I would think the Jazz would eyeball, obviously, and the top 5, 6 players have some of that potential, obviously. Spence, you make a great point. It depends on what Austin sees in Markkanen at 28. Okay, 28's still a young man. But in reality, what is the timetable that Danny and Austin and Ryan have put forth? Is this a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year? Because at that time, the Jazz reach a high level in the West, is Markkanen played himself out, right, of the contract and the value that he actually has right now. He's a unique talent, you would agree. Being a 7-footer, can stretch the floor and still work himself inside. But I think if they stay with the big front line and Filipowski and Walker and Lowry, that is intimidating, and there's some talent there. The biggest question is turnovers, which were, they averaged 20 and a half or nearly 21 a game last year. I don't have it in front of me, but there were nights that we were calling out, 27 turnovers a night. You can't have that and give your opposition 20 plus, extra possessions a game. I still think great teams have great point guards, and I think that's where you start. You have to make a decision on Keontae, and I think you have to, I think we were a little bit wowed with Isaiah Collier getting the call in the second half of the season, and the speed and determination. I think some leadership popped out that Will Hardy needs drastically, Spence. With a young team, somebody has to be the alpha. And I saw a little bit of that start to come out of Isaiah at the end of the season when he was given the opportunity. You remember he said at USC, kind of behind the light of a guy named Bronny James, and now he's got an opportunity to kind of prove who he is. And that kind of is exciting. Do they stay with him, or is he a guy they bring off the bench? So I think tonight's pick, personally, ought to be most likely a backcourt player with some defensive capability that can spark a team, and I think he's got to have an alpha personality as well. That's my take. And I think the front line's solid. John Collins still has the option on his contract, and he's played his tail off last year when given the opportunity after he finally kind of decided who he was and what Will Hardy needed out of him. But that's a $26 million decision that the Jazz can either say okay or maybe not after John. I'm sure he's going to take it, Spence. I doubt he's going to get half that on the open market. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. But I think the front line's strong. Guard play, wing play still in need.
All right, Bowler, let's move over to your thoughts on simply a rumor. And look, in this day and age of aggregation and this person pretending to be an NBA insider and that person just starting a blog, I don't really know what to make a lot of these rumors, but
I don't either.
Yeah, for sure. And there may be nothing here at all. And, part of me would really love to see some boldness tonight. Then there's part of me that understands pragmatically that this is a long game scenario. And that top 8 draft pick is something you need to hang on to. And it's probably more likely, this is my guess and my opinion, that we won't see anything super bold this offseason, but we will next offseason when some of the salaries expire and some of the young players maybe show some promise. But there are people that have been, I hate to even say reporting, but there's a lot of synergies between the Celtic front office and the Jazz front office. Danny hired Brad Stevens. Austin worked under Brad for the past number of years while Danny was out here. Will Hardy coached Jaylen Brown as he was the number 1 assistant for Ime Udoka. I don't think it makes sense to bring in a Jaylen Brown unless you're able to hold on to Lowry and hold on to Walker and probably even hold on to 5, right? And so I don't know what the Jazz would send to Boston. I really don't. And I don't know that Boston I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown, but that's just me. But if the framework of a deal makes sense and is on the table, do you feel like the Jazz should pull the trigger to bring in a Jaylen Brown? Because if you do bring in a Jaylen Brown and you hold on to Walker, you hold on to Lowry, you're able to hold on to number 5, you're not one of the 8 worst teams in the league. You're just not. So you're going to lose that pick next year. So do you think something like that does make sense?
Spence, that may be the biggest answer, the question and the answer that faces the Jazz tonight. And you know what? The comment about taking the Celtics down to the studs because of Tatum's injury is intriguing. We wouldn't have this conversation if Tatum was healthy because that combination of Brown and Tatum is dynamic, and Derek White. And, that's Boston, I thought, would have, yes, they would take a step back because of the injury to Tatum, but I thought they would just kind of make their way for another run. It's really an intriguing thought, is it not, that you would want to strip a team down because of an injury. And, he was hurt late, so he's going to be out for 12 months. They're going to be careful with him. And then you have to think about, Jaylen Brown and what is he, 9 years in? Or was that Tatum? But, again, it comes to how much longer and how valuable and what value does he have back. The connection is interesting. I will say that. If that would happen tonight, it pushes the Jazz forward in hyperdrive, in my opinion. The other part of that is, does a veteran like him or any player around the league with that type of credential, does that make a younger player even perk up and play better? I would probably say yes. The other part of this equation in my book, Spence, is if the Jazz kind of stay pat and they do want to protect the 8 spot, and they do pick up the 2 players or 3 or 4 and the other 2 tomorrow night, you got to make some roster moves, obviously, to fit them all in. But the other part of this equation is, yes, they could protect the 8 by still playing the younger players. Yes, they could win 17 more. They could be a 30, let's say a 30-win team, and just miss giving up the 8 spot to Oklahoma City, but yet still gain valuable experience, and you get a better feel of who you are, who stays, who goes, right? And next summer, with a very loaded draft, you make even your more bolder moves. So there's options there, but I think the question is how fast you want to accelerate the process, don't you?
Yeah, and I don't think it's ready to be accelerated, but the Jalen thing is interesting because he is good enough that if you hold on to Lowry and if you hold on to Walker and if you draft, let's say, Trey Johnson or Jeremiah Fears at 5, Taylor comes back healthy, Cody makes a little progress, puts on some weight, Keontae decides he wants to try to guard, Isaiah comes back and knocks down threes at a higher clip. Like, Craig, if they can acquire Jalen and hold on to some of their main pieces and the framework, like, the only way Boston does this is if they are all in on simply saving money mode, because a trade that could work is Collins and Clarkson and Sexton and a bunch of picks for Jalen. Yes. And if you do that, we got something, Craig. We do. Now, you do sacrifice 8 next year, but maybe it's worth it if you can get a star player like Jaylen Brown at the age of 28.
You know, Spence, the other part of this is we really don't know the financial mentality of the new ownership of the Celtics. They went for 6.1, and the Lakers just went for 10, the value of who the Lakers and the name brand. 10 billion, pardon me, and 6.1 billion. I wonder what the ownership, if they're going to try. I would think if you're going to take the Celtics and the Lakers, you've got to play ball, right? Or why even purchase such an iconic franchise? But I'm anxious to see, you know what? Money still is the bottom line, and they don't want to get into the second apron. So that is intriguing. If they would dump a salary of Jaylen Brown to try to break it to the studs while Tatum recovers and then reset. Their reset probably isn't anywhere near close to what the Jazz would be faced with, because free agency and players would flock to Boston because of just who they are. But, man, I'd say you bring up an interesting conversation, and you know what? We're going to get some answers here in the next 2 to 4 hours.
All right, Bowler, before I set you loose, let's tap into that sharp and mature, just sixth sense of yours. I want the Craig Bowler Jack gut. What is it? What does it tell you?
Okay.
What does your sixth sense tell you, your North Star tell you? Did they draft at 5 and 21, or do we see some movement?
I think we go 5 and 15. That's just me.
Okay.
I think Austin Ainge may make an impact in this draft tonight. I know it won't be Cooper Flagg at number 5. That's my insight there. Here's just something to think about. Spence, I want to get your quick thought. I know you got to go. But does he disrupt the top 5 pick by any chance? Is he a domino that could change things, even for the Jazz?
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I just don't know. Like, it feels like a player like Ace Bailey has more ceiling potential. I think Con Knippel is going to be like a good, solid 10 to 12 year NBA vet and a pro who can shoot it and guard on the perimeter. But I just and maybe he ends up being a steadier piece than Ace Bailey. But if Ace was able to reach his potential, it feels like he has more, like, maybe he can be one of those dudes. Potential because of all the intoxicating traits he has and measurements. But Knippel, to me, is more of a safe pick for a team that's actually ready to win. The Jazz need star power, and I'm not sure Knippel has star power.
Yeah, no, he's kind of a toolbox guy. I get it. The only reason I bring that up is obviously well coached, played at Duke alongside Flagg. You know, he got so much hype, and he's done well in workouts. Ace Bailey refused to work out. That just personally doesn't set well with me, but I get how it works today. You know, you saw me play, you know who I am, and he does have freakish measures of 6'8". You know, the Trey Johnson young man from Texas, a little smaller, but still, you know, a great athlete. And, you know, the kid from Rutgers, Ace, I mean, I've written down a couple of, names. that they respond or at least compare him to. And Michael Porter Jr. was one that I ran across. I thought that was kind of intriguing as well. And then there was an outside chance Jeremiah Fears may be a Jazz selection as well. So I think there's 2 or 3 names that are real potential unless something drops early and then that first domino drops and it could change, the whole complexity. But that's why we go through this every summer. And I think, again, this is one of the biggest drafts the Jazz have had, if not the biggest, especially with Austin 3 weeks into a new job at the helm in the war room tonight, making some very big decisions for this franchise.
Bowler, you're the man. Enjoy the night. We'll get you back on soon to break it down. Thank you, sir.
All right, pal. Take care, and have a good night.
You do the same. The great Craig Bowlerjack, TV voice of the Utah Jazz. We are about 1 hour and 30 minutes away from our live coverage of the 2025 NBA Draft. Myself, Gordy Chaser, Richard Smith, we're going to have a good time tonight, so stay tuned. We'll catch a break, but before we do that, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH and save a bunch of money on a bunch of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much as always. Great opportunities right now with the offers we have with Dish. It's never been better. Call us up. Listen, if you've got your oversized cable, DirecTV bill, you're overpaying. Call up and get the biggest, fastest DVR out there. It integrates streaming apps right into the system. It'll auto-record your locals, auto-record your games. It'll auto-hop commercial breaks. And we'll get you set up and installed as early as next day, get you 3 months free service, the whole service free. Plus, we'll throw in Paramount Plus and Showtime free for 4 months and dinner at JCW's. This is a great opportunity to put money back in your pocket, get some free TV, get an upgraded system. We'll come out and set it all up for free. And also ask about our internet options right now. We have a half a dozen different providers. Guys, there is nobody that you can call that can line up all the internet providers that we can and say, hey, these are the prices, this is the offers. We'll pick the best one for you, or you can pick the best one, and we'll get you set up with that, and we'll lower your internet bill and your TV bill, put money back in your pocket, upgrade the whole system. And we've got some great tricks, too, where the change in internet isn't a big deal, how we can have all your devices that are automatically connected. They just stay connected. So it's easy. You just pay less money. 424-DISH. Call us now, 801-424-DISH.
Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Some really fun breaking news that is not related to the NBA Draft or the Utah Jazz, but Real Salt Lake has just sent out an email that Diego Luna has been selected for the 2025 MLS All-Star Game. Diego was in the All-Star Game last year, and that has not happened. Back-to-back All-Star appearances for RSL have not happened since 2014, 2015. When it was Nick Rimando, Kyle Beckerman also made consecutive All-Star games, as did Will Johnson, but that was a decade ago. So congratulations to Diego Luna, a 2025 MLS All-Star, very well-deserved. Let's see. Bowler stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products. You can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local Salt Lake company, Nate Orchard, Jake Weber, friends of the program. They are here to help you as a resident of Salt Lake. So here's the deal. Been in business forever. They've got great lifetime warranties that are transferable to new owners if you are looking to sell a home. But if you just want to replace your windows, you can save $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more by dialing 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. We'll switch gears. Going to do a little college football coming up next. Big day for BYU yesterday. Excuse me, as Spencer Litton is our guest on the other side of a quick break right here on ESPN 700. Is this my guy's Jericho Road?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Of course.
We've resurrected them. Once a big piece of the Bill and Spence show back in the day. Our producer was a young man named Jason Shepard who wore jean shorts and loved LDS boy bands. Shep is now with our friends at BYU TV, as is our next guest, friend of the program, Spencer Linton, on a Wednesday afternoon. I know at some point you may have tried out for Jericho Road because I know you have an excellent voice. At some point, I know you were rocking a little J Road, yeah?
Truth be told, Spence, that's the first time I've ever heard that song, and I've never been more pleased to announce something in my life.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Look, I know we got to be quick with you today, so let's dig into it. I have a macro question first, Spencer, then we'll dig into some topics in a vacuum. 6 years ago, and my old producer actually sent out a tweet because I'd forgotten I'd made this comment, but 6 years ago, when the rumors of NIL started to surface and the potential of deep-pocketed donors to make a difference in athletic departments became somewhat of a reality, I said this is a massive, massive piece of potential advantage for BYU. This is something they can utilize and capitalize on, in addition to all the other things that BYU brings to be able to kind of get an edge that they haven't had for quite some time. So for a long time, about a decade or so, there was an innate advantage for Utah over BYU simply because of P5 inclusion with Pac-12 versus independence. And now the playing field is not just even, it feels like the momentum has shifted down south. Why do you think BYU's been able to capitalize on this era to add so many talented players, both basketball and football?
Yeah, getting the right coaches in place, and on the heels of Kevin Young and a winning season with Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young taking the basketball team to the Sweet 16, like that first and foremost to me, it has to be stated. Like you have to win for your boosters to consistently get behind you and say, okay, there are results. This is fun. We like what is happening. Also, the momentum of BYU finally being invited into a Power Four conference naturally had the fan base very excited and exuberant to want to get involved in any way that they can. So those two things, being involved and invited finally after so many years to the big boy table. Granted, you're not in a prime spot at that table yet, but you're still at the Power Four table. And then winning, that breeds naturally a lot of excitement. And then you have boosters that believe and went and fought for Kevin Young to get him from the Phoenix Suns as an assistant to BYU, and then to keep him at BYU just a few months ago when things really ramped up, or I should say a few weeks ago when it kind of got strange because the Suns job opened up and there were NBA opportunities again. Like these boosters, they know a winner when they see one. Kevin Young is clearly that. And what Kalani Sitake is doing in building his culture and trying to find guys that are the right fit, but trying to get the top tier members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yesterday's 5-star quarterback signing is a huge boost in that direction. Like all these things combining have created this really, really big wave of momentum. But it starts with winning and finally being at a Power Four level because there's just so much excitement and there's a real passion. Brian Santiago, the athletic director, keeps saying it's never been better, never been a better time to be involved in this athletic department and with this team and with the momentum that's happening. Like there's just so much juice and passion and excitement. And that starts with being at the big boy table and then delivering some really fun winning seasons.
And also being able to pay these players on par, or if not more than other schools via NIL, Spencer. It is okay that we say that out loud.
No question. I'm with you. And it's legal, right?
Of course.
Of course. The network at BYU, to your point, has always been there. It's been fantastic. Mark Pope has said a couple times, like, hey, we need more support. When he was at BYU, he's like, we need more support. We need more time. Spence, I don't know that the boosters believed in Mark the way that they do in Kevin Young and connected with him. There was a little bit of a disconnect somewhere. So Kevin Young, to his credit, has helped bridge that gap and make it more likely for the big money boosters to get behind him to an even greater capacity. But yes, it's always been there. Now that it's legal, they're saying, well, why wouldn't we? We love the school. We love the program. They're winning. We like these coaches and players that they're bringing in. Yeah, sign me up. So if it's legal, do it. That's fine. Like, now it becomes an arms race in that capacity, and it's totally okay. So yes, NIL is a huge part of it as well.
Well, and look, man, like, I was raised by a Mormon capitalist. I was raised by an LDS capitalist, okay? Like, it is a religion and a culture that understands the power of the purse. Help me understand where the messaging comes from, where there's, from my prism and my perspective, Spencer, a certain faction of people that work for the school or love the school that simply refuse to say out loud, yes, it's about winning. Yes, it's about P4. Yes, it's about the BYU experience. Yes, Kevin and Kalani are elite. But it's also about the ability to be very competitive and, yes, sometimes the higher bidder to be able to attract these players to come play basketball and football at BYU. What help me understand the deal where there's messaging in certain circles that, from my prism, seem to be very reluctant to just even say that out loud.
Yeah, great question. I think there is such a negative connotation associated with, well, BYU's just buying the players. That's the only reason that they're choosing BYU. Why would you ever go to BYU? Clearly, they're chasing a bag. I think people are so hesitant to admit that they do have competitive, if not elite, NIL and boosters behind this, because there is this faction of social media that says, well, nobody would pick BYU if it weren't for the money. And so I guess that's why I throw in the other things. It's a package deal. The NIL and money is a big part of that and a huge arm of that in making that wheel spin. If you take it away, it wouldn't go. But I think that people are hesitant, and the faction you reference are hesitant to talk about money because they don't want to somehow minimize how important the coaching arm is, the winning arm, the experience, the transformative experience they're promising athletes at BYU to become greater men and greater women, and the education. They want all of the arms to get their equal due. And so with this negative connotation around, well, it's only because of the money, that's probably why they shift away from that. I'm here to tell you that it's just one incredibly important arm in this wheel that makes the whole thing push forward.
You know what's interesting? First of all, the good news is social media isn't real, so we can just put that aside. But do you know who Sam Harris is, the podcaster Sam Harris? Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a big fan. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he communicates. And a couple of years ago, after Mr. Musk's takeover of X, he elected to exit stage left. And he did this hour-and-a-half podcast on why it was the best decision he ever made. And look, I check it. You know, that's where we've got the draft tonight. I'm waiting for news on the Jazz maybe doing something. But I'll tell you what, man, ever since I pretty much left the platform, you realize how small it is. You realize how irrelevant it is. You know what I mean? So, like, the people that are dragging BYU for adding talent online, I just don't give them any credence, man. Maybe it's just me.
Well, man, I wish more people thought like you, Spence. This is not a joke. Literally, I was sitting in my car about 30 minutes ago, and it's because I had been chided by some friends about kind of disappearing on social media. Like, hey, how come you're not posting as much? Like, where'd you go? Like, are you on summer vacation? And it's a purposeful move by me to just take a break, take a breath. Like, I'm with you. I still check it, but I don't feel like I need to constantly post stuff. I'm involved with shows that post content with me involved all the time. That's good enough for me in large part. But I was literally being chided and kind of ribbed for disappearing. But I feel free to a degree. So I'm going to join you in line there. I think there's real power in that. And I'm not saying that I feel the negativity from social media per se, but it is a very real element. And I wish more people could see it big picture like you are presenting, where it's, you can talk about this NIL just because there are fans from angry opposing fan bases around the conference and around the country, whether it's Oregon, who's in the battle for the Rider Lions movement, and he goes to BYU, or it's other Big 12 schools who are saying, oh, see, BYU just because of the money. Like, you're right. It is a very, very loud and obnoxious vocal minority in the grand scheme of things. And so I'm going to try and be better at that and not give the type of credence that a lot of people do to this social media wave because it's okay. It's okay for BYU to have incredible boosters and support and money and the backing that they do, all under a legal scope now where this is within the rules. So let's go ahead and flex where we have never been able to flex and do this thing.
You know, the other gift you give yourself before we move off of this, because I know you have a couple of minutes left. I did a podcast last week, and the guy was like, hey, you're getting killed online. How does that make you feel? I'm like, didn't see it. No idea. Or you get aggregated, and I no clue. Like, you just – freedom is the best term. Like, when you're getting attacked online, if you don't see it, it doesn't really happen. It doesn't even exist.
Yes. If the tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it or see it, does it actually fall?
Exactly.
Yeah. Great point.
All right, couple things here. We'll end with the Lions kid, but before we get there, the only local player that is kind of surrounding with some intrigue during the draft process is Yegor. We've had a couple of draft experts on the show today. What are you hearing about, the feedback he's received during this process and potentially where we could hear his name called tonight?
So I've spent significant time communicating with Yegor's camp and Travis Hansen and others. Travis is with Yegor in Brooklyn tonight and has been a huge part of why Yegor is at BYU and his whole experience there. And from what I have gathered from the combine and from interviews and everything that Yegor has done in this really just endless process to get ready, it feels like there are 5 teams that are the most interested, and I'll list them in order of where they pick first to last, starting with the Houston Rockets. They were at number 10, but they obviously traded that pick to the Phoenix Suns with the Kevin Durant exchange. So the Yegor to Houston feels less likely now that they don't have that 10th pick. The Portland Trail Blazers are a team that's been very interested in him. The Chicago Bulls at 12, the Atlanta Hawks at 13, and the Brooklyn Nets, who have 5 first-round picks. I believe they pick, 8th and 19th. The Wizards are in there too. I don't think they would take Yegor as early as 6. I know they pick 18th. I don't think he's going to slip to 18. Would be a surprise to see him there. But those are the teams. So it feels like he's going to go somewhere between 11 and maybe 17. I think most likely, looking at the teams and the conversations that have happened, his skill set, the need for a point guard to help out right now, I'm looking at 12 with the Chicago Bulls for Yegor to join a guy like Josh Giddey and help out that point guard line and the combo guard and his distribution and passing ability, or the Atlanta Hawks with Trae Young. Like, Atlanta could really use a big guard with Yegor's skill set. I've heard that scouts have been very impressed in his individual workouts with his shot and the progress that he has made, his higher release point. He's worked relentlessly to prove to people that he is a better shooter than we saw, especially early in his campaign at BYU. He got better later in the season, but they don't talk about that. They just think, 29% or 27% three-point shooter, yikes. He has worked so hard, tirelessly, really. That's the word that Travis Hansen used, to get better at his shot, and he has impressed some people. So my best guess, Chicago 12, Atlanta at 13, because both of those teams really like Yegor, have invested a lot of time into him, and he can immediately fit into their specific rosters.
All right, before I say you lose, because I know you got to run, so be as short as you want. Tell me about the process that landed Rider Lions in Provo to play for BYU. And look, I mean, we won't see him for a few years. There's a mission thing, but what sort of quarterback prospect is he, and what's the buzz down there in Provo?
Gosh, you know what's crazy is he referenced on the Pat McAfee show that he got his first scholarship offer in 8th grade, and that was from BYU. He got a scholarship offer from the Cougs when he was 13. And I remember vaguely hearing about that and thinking, wow, are we really starting this early? But clearly they saw something in him that was special. And BYU was paying attention to his older brother, and there was connections to the family. And obviously he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And there's been a huge emphasis from Kalani and his staff to be way more competitive in going and getting the best members of the faith, because they have lost out in recent years to the likes of Utah and Oregon and USC and Power 5 schools on the West Coast. And then it's slipping into SEC territory with Alabama and Ole Miss. So the emphasis has been, we have to figure out a way to go and get the best guys that fit our culture, that grew up in the religion, and make this a place for them to want to be. So there was a huge push there to accommodate his desire to serve a mission for however long that mission is going to be. I've heard everything from a year to 14 months to a year and a half to a full 2 years. We don't know, but he does want to serve a mission for at least some length of time. BYU is clearly a place that can help him do that. And they had enough of a number financially. Oregon came in at the last minute and offered more money. I don't know what the figure was. All I was told was, in that realm, Oregon offered more money than BYU, but it was not just about a strict dollar sign and about getting the most money. It's way bigger for somebody who is a member of the faith and has a long history with BYU, going back to his first scholarship offer in 8th grade. They love what he can do on the field. I hear a lot of Zach Wilson comparisons. And I hate to even say this one because people are going to be like, oh my gosh, Spencer, stop it. Stop the hyperbole. But he's a bigger kid, 6'2", 220 pounds, and he's a physical runner. So I heard in a slight way like Jalen Hurts. So Zach Wilson, a little bit of Jalen Hurts in the way he plays, but very confident. He has got a rocket arm, and he's a really, really capable runner. In fact, I watched this tape, and I thought that there were flashes a little bit of a guy like Jackson Dart, especially with him being a bigger frame. So that's the type of player he is. BYU worked relentlessly. Chad Lewis told me, probably 4 years ago when he was a freshman, I don't know what it's going to take, but we have to get that guy to BYU. We have to get that guy to BYU. And he wasn't really looking at BYU seriously at the time after his sophomore year in high school. Like, BYU wasn't in his top 5. They probably weren't even in his top 10. But the shift to Power 4 conference, boosters, NIL money, the right culture, the right connection with his family and faith, it all kind of came together, and now Ryder Lyons is a 5-star quarterback at BYU.
All right, buddy. Well, good perspective. It is an exciting time down there. A lot of momentum in the positive direction, so appreciate the color and context. Have a great week, man. We'll chat soon, okay?
Always good to talk to you. Thank you for freeing my mind in the social media realm, my friend.
I am here for you, Spencer Linton, to be your North Star, to be your Leahona in life. Anything you need, you let me know, okay?
Let's go. Jericho Road, let's go.
Love it. Spencer Linton, our buddy from BYU TV. BYU dialing in the highest-rated prospect they've had since 2002 at the quarterback position. That player, Ben Olsen, who didn't work out at BYU. How about our guy comparing Ryder Lyons to Jalen Hurts? I just wanted to let him cook. I didn't want to,
You gotta let that guy cook sometimes.
Yeah, enjoy the time.
Jackson Dart may be a little bit more comparable.
Yeah. Let's pump the brakes. But Spence, this week, I appreciate him stopping by. We will catch a break. We've got 3 hours down. Well, technically, we have 3 hours to go. But we will do the 5 o'clock hour of our afternoon drive show, say goodnight at 6, then transition into NBA draft coverage with the great Richard Smith and the great Gordy Chase. About 90 years combined experience in pro basketball. We're going to have you covered start to finish. Round 1 tonight. Round 2 tomorrow night, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time Wednesday afternoon style. 4 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Halfway through that work week and one day closer to the weekend. Happy Wednesday to you. Happy draft day to you. The NBA draft begins in 55 minutes and 9 seconds from right now. And we will have the best draft coverage for you in the market. I can promise you that. I'm going to be anchoring our coverage. We have Richard Smith, Gordy Chiesa live in studio, combined 90 years of experience, literally 90 years of experience analyzing prospects and drafting prospects in pro basketball. The Utah Jazz, as of now, are sitting at number 5 and number 21. No draft day trades yet, but John Collins has opted in to his contract for this upcoming season, about $26 million and change. So that was a piece of news that came down. The mock drafts that are out have the Jazz taking either Trey Johnson, Jeremiah Fears, Con Knipple, or Ace Bailey. So stay tuned. We bounced around a little bit today. We've done a lot of draft, a lot of NBA. Started things off with Tim Bontemps live in Brooklyn at Barclays. Rafael Barlow stopped by, stuck in New York City traffic on his way to Brooklyn, New York at Barclays Center. Just did a little college football with Spencer Linton. You're going to hear from the voice of the Utah Jazz, Craig Bolerjack. And then we will launch into our live coverage of the NBA draft beginning at 6 o'clock. But joining me live in studio, very special guest once again, my guy Gavin from Honest Second Opinion Plumbing on a Wednesday. Gavin, happy draft day, buddy. How you doing?
Happy draft day. I'm doing great. How are you, Spence?
I'm good. I know you're a big Utah football fan, but does the NBA draft move the needle for you at all?
You know, I after last season, I just like to get more than 20 wins.
Fair enough. It's tough, man. It's tough. Like a lot of Jazz fans waiting for something that gives them hope.
That's
right?
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and we've been spoiled in our market. We've had really good teams for a long time, so we'll see what they do tonight. All right, Gavin, here's where I want to start. Honest Second Opinion Plumbing. Give me the origin story. Why did you decide to do this?
No, right, absolutely. So it all started 8 years ago, Spence. I was sitting in my house wintertime, and the furnace turned off. And I wasn't sure why. It would turn off, turn on. Wasn't working well, and so I called a really well-known HVAC company in Utah. They came out, they looked at it, and the guy spent 3.5 hours in my home selling me on why I needed a completely brand new HVAC system, a new furnace. You know, it's only going to be $5,000. You know,
how's that all? Yeah,
only $5,000, and we'll get you a brand new one. You know, this one's way too old. And so after 3.5 hours, I was just texting my wife, and I was like, please come save me, like, get me out of this. Like, I want him gone out of our house. And then he finally left. I looked on, just for a local handyman, called one. He came over. He checked out the furnace, and he looked at the flame sensor rod in there. He cleaned it with some steel wool, put it back in, and the furnace worked for another 8 years. And so it's like he charged me $50 and then left. It took, all but 20 minutes. And that's when I realized that, when I've got a problem in my home, there's two big issues. One, I want to make sure I'm finding the right person, right? Like it took me how long to find the HVAC company? I was Googling, trying to find somebody, looking at reviews. It's a pain. And I'm already upset that my furnace isn't working, and so I don't want to spend the time to go and do that. And then the second thing is I don't want to be taken to the cleaners. I don't want somebody selling me a whole new system because I don't know HVAC.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I don't need somebody selling me a whole new system when all I needed was to clean the flame rod sensor. And so that's what we're doing. With your plumbing issues, we're going to put you in contact with a trusted referral partner, somebody that can fix your problem without you having to spend hours or days trying to coordinate with them to get them to your house. And then we're also going to come and help diagnose the problem and give you an idea of what it's like.
See, I love this because I think we all can relate to a scenario where we're just not educated about something that is wrong with our car or something that is wrong with our house or something that is wrong with our teeth, right. Whatever it is. And we just don't want to be sold a bill of goods. Just be honest and quote me the right price, and I'm happy to pay that, but don't upsell me. And it sounds like you've kind of landed in this lane where, yes, you're running a business, but you also want to help people avoid pitfalls that we all tend to fall in. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. And that's when I was debating about starting this company, and this is a new company, it's only a few months old, but, we thought about, well, let's perform the service. But the issue became is, well, how can we make sure that we're not using our own self-interest when we're quoting things out?
Sure.
Even if I can stay honest, if I start hiring other people within my company, are they going to be honest?
Mm-hmm.
Because these trades workers, they're great, but the more you pay, the more they get paid. So they're incentivized to charge you more. Like that's what it boils down to. And so that's when I decided, you know what? Instead of fixing the problem, we're going to go ahead and diagnose the problem. Be able to give you the exact same advice we'd give our own mothers without any sort of ulterior motives. And then we'll put you in contact with people that we trust. And we were refreshing this list constantly. If we trust somebody, but then we start hearing some negative feedback, we take them off our list. And so we give people a chance to prove their trustworthiness.
And you're putting your money where your mouth is, because we are 66 days away from kickoff for Utah football. Tell our listeners what you're doing for them between now and kick for Utah UCLA.
That's right. So if you have a plumbing issue right now between now and August 30th, we will come and do the diagnosis for free. So we always start with an over-the-phone diagnosis, see if we can solve the issue just through a quick FaceTime. If we can't, we'll come out to your home. Normally we charge $20 for that FaceTime or $50 to come out to your home. Right now, until August 30th, we will do it for free. So any issue, if you wanted to get a new water heater, a new tankless water heater, you got leaks, you got toilet problems, whatever it is, you give us a call or go to our website, and we'll hook you up for free.
So that is until kick. So you only have limited time to do that. You just alluded to, I want to ask you another question here, because the name of the company is Honest Second Opinion Plumbing. And forgive me, I'm not a big HVAC guy, but you don't only do plumbing issues, right? There are several services you offer.
Right. So right now we are focused with plumbing, but we do want to, expand and do HVAC, do electrical, the door frames, windows, balconies, landscaping. So we are trying to get it to the point where anything that you have an issue with, so honest second opinion for your home is really what we're trying to do. Anything that you have an issue with your home, we're trying to get the professionals that can give you an honest diagnosis, tell you what a price range would be, and then put you in contact with somebody that can come and fix it. So that way you're only stopping at one place. You get the knowledge that you need to empower yourself to be able to take care of the problem, and then you're put in contact with one person or, maybe one or two people that could fix the problem.
Before we get to the contact information, I know that you have already been able to help some people really save thousands of dollars based off this approach. So let's hear about a testimonial or two.
Absolutely. So we actually just had about 2 weeks ago, we had a couple that called in, and they were quoted a repipe on their home, which when we got there, it made perfect sense. The pipes were corroded. There was leaks going on. And $18,000 was what the repipe was quoted. So not cheap, but when we looked at it, the size of the house, the amount of work that it would take, that was accurate to what we would quote as well. But then what happened, though, is the company that came out said to get under their crawl space in their house to finish the repipe, it was going to cost an additional $12,000 because they would have to dig it out by hand. So I went and I looked at their crawl space, and I couldn't understand it because it looked like any normal crawl space to me. And so I was like, well, tell me about the plumber. And they're like, well, he was a big guy. He was pushing over 3 bills. And so it was a matter of the guy couldn't fit in there.
Okay.
And so he was going to have to pay $12,000 to get him in there. And so we ended up connecting him with some other plumbers that could come out there. They did the repipe, saved him $12,000.
Huh. So that's wild. I mean, look, so if you guys have plumbing problems and you're tired of being upsold and charge thousands of dollars for things that you don't need, definitely get a hold of Honest Second Opinion Plumbing. Gavin, how do they get a hold of you?
So there's 2 ways. You can either go to our website. You can just Google us. If you just Google Honest Second Opinion Plumbing, you should be able to find us there on that first page. Or you can also call us at 801-341-9592.
So if you have issues right now in your house with plumbing, if you've already been quoted something and you're not sure if it's accurate, whatever the deal, just get a hold of Gavin and our friends at Honest Second Opinion Plumbing by dialing 801-341-9592, 801-341-9592, 801-341-9592, or online at HonestSecondOpinionPlumbing.com. Gavin, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, too. Go Utes.
There you go. Love it. We'll catch a quick break. We're going to bring in Craig Bowlerjack coming up on the other side. We're 46 minutes away from our draft coverage. Jazz at 5-21. See what Bowler says on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, that'll do it for the show today, at least this show. Afternoon Drive is over, and we've got to get out of here because coming up on the other side, it is our live coverage of the 2025 NBA Draft, live from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Gordy Chiesa, Richard Smith, a combined like 90 years of pro basketball talent evaluation experience coming your way. So, Porter, let's get out of here so we can do the draft stuff coming up next. What comes our way on a Thursday edition of the radio show?
Yeah, on a Thursday edition of The Drive, of course, we will have the first round of the NBA Draft to react to. Richard Smitty Smith will be in studio with you to react to that. We'll chat with one Andy Larson on the program for some Jazz reaction. Pablo Mastroeni on one Diego Luna, the All-Star. And we'll go from there. Some sports court action and more on a Thursday NBA Draft Day 2 edition of The Drive.
There you go. So stay tuned for a Thursday show. We'll say goodnight for this Wednesday edition of the program. And a special thank you to Tim Bontemps, Rafael Barlow, Craig Bowlerjack, and Spencer Linton. For any of the sound you may have missed, website, ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app. Take us on the go. Available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do on our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page. Podcast is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review. Say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Coming up on the other side, live coverage of the NBA Draft with Gordy Chase and Richard Smith. So don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN.